هدايا صاحي كي تستريح وغص الدعاء. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى أهله وصحبه ومن والاه. You guys, welcome to the sixth session of Core Academy. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make this yet another beneficial, iman boosting, and iman solidifying session for you. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. You guys, today our goal is to do the unthinkable. And that is today, inshallah, we're going to conquer not one, but two arguments for the existence of God. So help me God, because we got to get through a lot. Now, folks, to that end, even though I love doing an official review at the beginning of the class because it jumpstarts you and gets your competitive juices flowing, today, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to do that because I want to be able to kind of finish on time. However, I couldn't entirely help myself, so I was like, I got to do at least one review slide. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm about to share with you folks a quote from Charles Darwin. And this right here, folks, is a powerful piece of evidence you can fling at a naturalist. Like this right here is serious ammo that you can fire off. So I'm about to show you this quote. I want you to read it. And here's the thing I'm looking for from you guys. Just have your chat boxes up. What I'm looking for is, what previous discussion does this quote remind you of? And specifically speaking, under what topic can we use this as an ammo? I can just give you this piece of evidence and furnish it, but you got to be able to use it in the right situation. It's kind of like a pharmacist knows what medicine, what are the properties of a medicine. They know about a particular medicine or a drug, but it's a doctor that can use it in the right situation. Same here. Here's a piece of evidence for you. Drop a hashtag, answer, or something like that, and tell me, what does this remind you of, and where can you use this as an evidence for your case? So with this in mind, by the way, we need a guidebook coordinator. Who's our guidebook coordinator today? And someone with a strong narrative voice, because we're gonna need that today. We have a decent amount of reading to do today. Anyone willing to be the guidebook coordinator for today? Going once and going twice. All right, Sister Zainab, even though you're in the MVP race, no one else volunteered, so it's all yours. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Okay, so Sister Zainab, do justice to this. Here, look at what Charles Darwin himself says, the architect of the evolutionary theory. Bismillah, go ahead.
But then within me, the horrid doubt always arises whether the convictions of man's mind, which has been developed from the mind of the lower animals, are of any value or any trustworthy. Would anyone trust in the convictions of a monkey's mind if there are any convictions in such a mind?
Within me arises, this is called the Darwin's doubt, that within me arises the horrid doubt. Folks, this right here is a powerful piece of evidence. What point, what discussion does it remind you of? And where can we use this? Where can we strategically use this as an ammo? Okay, so we're going to start with Anas and Sister Aina. Anas, get us started, please. Bismillah. What does it remind you of?
This reminds me of where we were kind of talking about naturalists and how they only think in the like the physical world, and they don't even trust their minds. They say it's just an accidental concoction of evolution.
Do they say they don't trust their minds, Anas?
They don't trust their brains.
Do they say that though? Because no one at least so obviously holds such a preposterous position, because you would look dumb, right? So they would never say it.
They just say it in an indirect way, I guess you would say.
They don't even admit it, in fact. But it's the inevitable conclusion of their worldview. You see, no one holds ridiculous beliefs. But we just have to kind of spell it out for them. But if you hold X, Y, and Z as a belief, it naturally has to lead to that. So we have to kind of take their stuff and tell us, look at the absurdities it leads to. Here's one of the absurdities. It leads to the undermining of your own mind. And you're okay with that? So just so you know, I wouldn't put this in their mouth. You just have to kind of spell it out for them. So, Anas, we're going to give you half a point for a valiant attempt. Sister Aina, help us out. Yes.
So I was thinking that they said that their minds are equipped for learning how to survive and not really for finding truth in itself. So that's kind of where they aren't able to trust it. Going back to this, like he says that there are no convictions in such a mind because it's only for survival and not for finding truth.
Very good. Very good. So the discussion, it should remind you, is when we were discussing naturalism as a worldview, and I was giving you four arguments. And the first argument I gave you that it's self-refuting. That's a discussion, it should remind you. And it should also remind you how we were talking about how. So here we go. Let me see if there's someone else. Mason says, when they say naturalism is true or science is the only way to the truth. Very good. So that was the chapter that we brought this particular discussion under. Excellent. You guys, in a summary, if someone else doesn't want to take a crack at it, let me lay it down for you in a way that's easy to process and remember. So, first of all, you appreciate the honesty of Charles Darwin here. You really do. Because look, two issues here now. First, on naturalism, already our brains are taking a hit because they came through a random, mindless process of nature. So that is already a problem. Now, Charles Darwin tells you on top that your great-great-great-great-grandma or grandpa was a monkey. So the source code of your brain is coming from a monkey. That is the genetic origin of your brain. And he's like, I don't trust the mind of a monkey, but that's where my mind is coming from. So already the mind is a product of a mindless, random trial and error process. And then on top of that, monkeys are involved. So both of them combined is a double whammy for a naturalist. So should we really trust our mind on naturalism? It becomes a little bit difficult. And at least Charles Darwin was honest enough to admit it. That's where you want to use this as an ammo. With this in mind, inshallah, you folks, we are ready to begin. This leads me to the third principle that we didn't get to cover last time, but inshallah we are going to cover today. You guys, please go ahead and take your guidebook to the correct page number. I believe it's page number, let me just see if I have this right. Yes, it's page number 35. We are now on the third principle, don't shoot yourself in the foot. So if everybody's oriented to that, we are inshallah ready to begin. Y'all, this discussion right here that we're about to have, I am not kidding and exaggerating. This discussion right here will save your iman probably more than any discussion we're going to have. This is gold right here. I don't know, out of all the discussions and all the principles we're going to cover in DD, I don't know if there's one that you're more likely to use than this one right here. So, I need you all dialed in. Here you go. This is how you vaccinate yourself against doubt. So let me set this up for you. Have your chat boxes up because I need your input on something. You guys, from the Muslims I've talked to who are doubting their faith and losing their iman, it's rarely because they feel some scientific theory is contradicting Islam. By and large, alhamdulillah, Quran and Sunnah are bulletproof from a scientific angle. And also we know, as we learned in the first principle, science is always in a flux, always being revised. It gives you probable knowledge. So rarely it poses a serious challenge. Sure, with evolution right now, we have some level of conflict, but even that we can fairly easily explain away. Sheikh Yasir Qadhi has really good videos on it. Check it out. So by and large, Muslims doubt their faith not because of scientific issues, but they doubt their faith because of blank issues. Someone fill in the blank for me. If it's not scientific issues that are causing the heartburn, what is then? 5. 4. Very good, Rafi. Amazing. Moral issues. Yes, Rafi, give a full point to Rafi, please. You guys, by and large, Muslims have issues with their faith because of moral issues. What do I mean by moral issues? Where they feel something in Islam violates their moral sensibilities. So take the age of Aisha. What are they going to say? They're like, it's immoral for the Prophet of God to do something like that. My faith is shaking. Women getting half the share of the inheritance. That's unfair. How's that fair? So it's moral dilemmas that are the sources of doubt, not scientific discoveries. So you guys, if you're ever in a situation where something in Islam makes you morally uncomfortable, guess what? You can use all three principles that we have discussed so far. Well, so far we have discussed 2, and today we're going to learn the third one. You can use all 3 principles, inshallah. You can summon all 3 of them and to inshallah help assuage the difficulty. So what are we going to do? We're going to start out, folks, by showing you how when you're in a moral situation, you can use all principles, one step at a time, as a step-by-step process to help you out of this difficult moral situation. Let's start. So let's set up the scenario here, dealing with an aspect of religion that makes you morally uncomfortable. Take any scenario you like, any ruling in Islam that makes you feel that way. And now, what am I saying? Step-by-step process. Start with principle number one. Now, here's where I need somebody's help. Team Abu Bakr, let's start with you. Let's get the competition started. Here's where I need y'all's help. Team Abu Bakr, using the first principle, we can't directly use the first principle. You kind of have to modify it a little bit, change the wording of the principle a little bit. Because remember, we learned in the first principle, my inductive knowledge is limited. But we were using that in a scientific sense, in scientific situations. You need to convert it, modify it a little bit to use it in a moral situation. Help me out. It's a little bit of a difficult question. How would you use principle number one to help you in a moral situation? Take the age of Aisha if that helps you kind of make it more concrete. So, 5. Rafi, get us started. How would you change the wording of the first principle to use it in a moral situation? Go ahead.
You could say that instead of my inductive knowledge, you could say like my moral and objective judgment is limited and
Wow.
maybe
Very
based
good.
from an objective standpoint.
My moral knowledge is limited. Excellent. That's it. Why? Now, why is that a rational position to hold, Rafi? Articulate that out for me, please.
Because like you talked about before, how like for if it's something we can't understand, like say for the past, we can't impose our limited knowledge from like this time era on things that have happened in the past or through things we're not like experts in.
But that can be a dangerous road to go down. If you say, well, we can never judge the past, and they're like, well, then we can never judge atrocities of the past either. So that might become a little bit tricky. You know what I'm saying? Well, but why is it justified if someone from Team Abu Bakr... So first of all, let's give Rafi a full point. Let me open it up to the next team here, Team Umar. Team Umar, why is it a rational position to hold? I'll articulate it out for you. Why is it a rational position to hold that my moral knowledge is limited? 5, 4, 3, and 2, and 1. Anas, you're in Team Umar, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead. Articulate this out for me, please.
So the reason is because we were just not in that time where we are historically not there. You know what I'm saying? So basically, for example, the age of Aisha, if we look back in history, that was normal. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but you're going down the same road Rafa is, and I said that's a dangerous road to go down because if you keep playing the card that, well, it was in the past, who are we to judge? And then on that note, someone who's committed atrocities in the past, like a nation has committed a massacre, like take Israel, they committed a massacre in the past. They're like, well, you don't get to judge us from the 19th century. World was different, reality was different. Then you could never judge anyone in the past. You see what I'm saying, Rafa?
Yeah.
So that. I would use a slightly different wording. Muhammad Mustafa, what do you have for me? Or is it Amir? Sorry. Amir, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, can you argue that we don't know the morals of that time, or
That's the same argument they're making. We don't
so, like the scientific
we
fact,
don't get to judge history, basically.
so like science, since science changed time to time, we don't know like the life expectancy.
But we're talking about moral situations, not scientific ones.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm trying to critique you guys to coach you into a better argument. Folks, here's what you can say. Go ahead and write this down if you need to. Because morality is heavily influenced and limited by culture, I could be overreacting. Meaning your current sense of moral outrage could be shaped by your culture and heavily influenced by your society. So you could end up morally overreacting to a situation which may not deserve that level of overreacting. Let's do a little experiment to prove this point to you guys. If you guys can do me a favor, and I want, if as many people as possible, I need you to express your outrage level. Now, more outraged you are, I want you to add more A's to the outrage spelling. So if you're like super outraged, you would spell it like AAAGE, something like that. If you're somewhat outraged, then put 1 or 2 A's. Super outraged, put multiple A's. Okay, so I want to gauge your level of outrage here. So if your chat boxes are up, I'm just going to put a statement. Tell me your outrage level. Ready? Here we go. Here's the first one. A young person was murdered last night. Tell me your outrage level, folks. Okay. Bara, brutally honest. Where are the rest of you? Okay, outrage. Okay, very cool. Very cool. Very cool. Okay, here's the second one, folks. So we have some idea where the audiences are. Ready for the next one? Here we go. A young person was sexually molested and raped last night. Notice the outrage levels that are coming in, folks. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Now, folks, tell me, objectively speaking, which one is worse? We know, objectively, murder is worse because life is over. The second person, even though is in a messed up situation, at least they have a chance to heal, to be whole again, and to experience other wholesome moments of life. The first person, the chance is done. But why is it that we are morally more outraged by the second one? It's not actually a surprise because we know scientific studies, social studies have shown us in America right now, there are two crimes that create more moral outrage than any other crimes. You know what they are? Rape and pedophilia. These produce more moral revulsion right now in America than any other crime. Notice right here how we are influenced by that most of us felt more outraged by the second one than the first one. Do you guys understand what I'm getting at? Your society shapes how outraged or how delighted you feel in a particular moral situation. So how do you know, back to my first point that I was making, how do you know you're not overreacting to a moral issue because your moral landscape is shaped by culture? By the way, you guys, I see the effects of this, how culture influences morality, every day now in Islam school. You know, 10 years ago, when I was teaching, I never had to explain to my high schoolers why homosexuality is off limits. They intuitively understood, just like we are repulsed by incest, objectively, we have that moral compass, we are repulsed by homosexuality. Now guess what? I have to have multiple sessions with my high schoolers justifying Islam's moral stance on homosexuality. So it's kind of like, the analogy I like to give is like, imagine a fish living in water. Would it ever know it's wet? The only thing the fish knows, like whatever it looks, plants are gently waving, things are floating. That's the reality of a fish. It's stuck in that watery paradigm. So you could be stuck in your cultural, moral paradigm that's causing you to overreact or not react at all to certain situations. Like those cannibals we talked about last time. That was in their zeitgeist. That was their culture. So it wasn't eliciting a reaction that would be solicited otherwise. So all I'm saying, folks, is we need a level of intellectual humility, some level of POV flexibility, that yes, we have a moral compass and we rely on it, but understand, society could stifle that. So you always want to have a POV flexibility and a level of humility. I trust my moral compass, but I'm open to the possibility that I'm being influenced by the vibe around me. So that's how you use the first principle to kind of get you out of a sticky moral situation. In the age of Aisha radiallahu anha, you could be like, look, maybe I'm overreacting to this because in my society, everyone really finds this unsavory and distasteful. You just have to be open to that possibility. Now, if that doesn't help you out, the first principle is not doing it for you, no problem. We move on to the second principle. And that is, try the second principle, don't miss forests for the trees. Here, folks, very simply. Okay, how do we articulate this? Team Uthman, how do you use the second principle to help you out in a moral situation? Come on, this should be an easy one. First one was a little tricky. Using the second principle to help you in a moral scenario shouldn't be that hard. Team Uthman, 5, 4, and 3, and 2, and 1. So let's see here. Who do we have? I see Muhammad Mustafa. Muhammad Mustafa, help us out.
Yeah, I'm saying for that one, we shouldn't just look at one thing that doesn't sit right with us and then ignore the whole picture as one.
So in the case of the Prophet ﷺ, we have forest of evidence about how humane, kind, gentle, and compassionate our Prophet ﷺ was. How he forgave the worst of his enemies. We know from Aisha radiallahu anha herself what kind of love and affection she was shown. So many names of Allah revolve around mercy, for instance, and forgiveness. So if there's one thing that's morally rubbing you the wrong way, there has to be an explanation. We're not going to ignore the entire forest for some moral trees. So there you go. That would be the thank you, Muhammad Mustafa. Let's give you a point for that. And you guys, if that doesn't work, the first two principles aren't doing it for you, then this is where we move on to the third one. Sister Zainab, please help us out. Go ahead and read this.
Intellectual toolkit principle number 3, don't shoot yourself in the foot. In a nutshell, it is intellectually absurd to put God's fairness and moral judgment on trial. This is because if God is unfair,
Okay, here we go. So you guys, this argument is a little technical, but it's really, really powerful. So let's take it easy so it properly sinks in. Here we go. Here's what we're saying so far. It is intellectually absurd to put God's fairness on trial. This is because if God is unfair, how can you trust your own sense of fairness, which also comes from Him? Let that sink in for a second. The very compass you're using to figure out right and wrong comes from Him. So if God is flawed in His morality, wouldn't your own moral compass also be flawed because it was made by Him? Do you understand how self-refuting that is? Here, let's put this down. This is tantamount to intellectual. Sister Zainab, sorry, whenever you're done writing.
this is tantamount to intellectually shooting yourself in the foot because flawing God's judgment undermines the credibility of your own moral judgment.
Ah, there you go. Someone want to paraphrase in their own words? Because I want to see if it's sinking in, and paraphrasing kind of always helps. See, someone who we have not yet heard from. You guys got. So let me first tell you the next ayah of the Quran as we wait for some paraphrases to come up. Allah says in the Quran, Sister Zainab, whenever you're ready.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, God won't be interrogated about what He does. Rather, you will be interrogated about what you do.
Yeah, Quran gives it to you straight. Let me paraphrase this principle in another way. It is foolish to put God on trial when He's the one who hardwired morality into you. You're using God's programming of morality to judge Him, to undermine Him and His messenger. Look, think about it this way. I think I mentioned this last time. Because you're able to detect right from wrong, that you feel delighted by good, repulsed by evil, doesn't that in itself an indication that God is morally good? Otherwise, why would He give you the ability to tell right from wrong? So if He gave you that compass where you love good, are repulsed by evil, to use the programming and the wiring He gave you, you're going to now put Him on trial? It's just a self-defeating proposition. Here, I like to give a glass analogy that really articulates the point home. Let me first hear from Mason, from you guys. Mason, talk to me, man. See if this is sinking in.
Yeah, so I just wanted to share a reflection, which is a lot of the people I like wouldn't put that on God. They would put that on a lot of the things that they think are unfair are in the hadith and the sunnah. So they would chalk that up to like human error, human imperfections, or tainting the original evidences.
That's a very
why
good
they would
point.
have.
It's a very good point. So that's where you have to use the forest for the tree first, the second principle, and then work your way down. But Mason, this would be super, super helpful. Principle number 3, when someone cannot explain a calamity that occurred on earth. You see? So in that situation, if they are a believer in God and they can't make sense of why an earthquake occurred or why something that seems morally outrageous occurred, then in this situation, understand this principle would become activated. So it's not just something that you find in Revelation, but it's also something that occurs in life. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
And also, I would use this principle. You're absolutely right. I don't know if you guys appreciated the profound point Mason made. This principle can't just work in silence or in a silo by itself. I can only throw this principle to someone who's convinced that the Quran is revelation. The Prophet is a prophet of God. Now, once they're convinced of that, if they find something problematic, I can use that principle and tell them, hey, but why would you put God on trial here? When you know it's coming from God. But they already have to be convinced it's from God. In the case of tragedies of life, they always blame God directly anyway, so you can immediately use this principle there to kind of get yourself out of a sticky situation. Now, let me help you understand why this is a self-defeating logic. Here's a quick glass example for you that I like to use. So you guys imagine you are a scientist who wears glasses all the time, like me. It's a permanent fixture on your face, bulletproof thick, mashallah. Now, you have to wear them even when you're conducting your lab experiments. Interestingly, One of the lab experiments that you're conducting, one of your research projects, is studying glasses and lenses themselves and how effective they are. And after a long study, you conclude wearing glasses significantly distort our view of things. Here's a little sentence for you. After a long study, you conclude wearing glasses significantly distort your view of things. Someone from Team Khadija tell me, or I think it's Team Khadija. Team Khadija, tell me, what's wrong with that statement? 5, 4, 3, and 2, and 1. So let me set up the experiment again for you. Imagine you are someone who wears glasses, and you kind of need it even when you're performing your lab experiments. And one of your research projects is to study glasses and lenses themselves. And after studying, you conclude wearing glasses distort our view of things. What the heck's wrong with that conclusion? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so Sister Aina and Zainab are in the same team. So let's go from Sister. Okay, let's go to Sister Aina first, and then we'll go with Sister Zainab. Go ahead, Sister Aina. Bismillah, what do you have?
Well, this statement is technically true because it does distort our view of things, but it distorts it in the way that you as a scientist are able to, do your studies on glass itself. So it's just kind of like you use the tool to kind of dismiss the tool, which doesn't
Yeah, so what's wrong with the conclusion? If you could summarize it in one sentence.
I don't know.
Well, look, if distort your view of things, you wore glasses to reach that conclusion. You understand? You're wearing glasses to view glasses in the first place. So if glasses distort our view of reality, then how do you know your own conclusion wasn't distorted? See the self-defeating loop that gets into? That's basically what we're saying. You're using your moral compass to judge God's morality. But the very fairness of your moral compass depends on God's fairness. If He's unfair, how can you trust your own fairness that He gave you? It becomes a self-refuting loop. Hopefully that made sense. Sister Zainab, articulate that out for us, please.
Excuse me. I was going to kind of say along the same words as a view of if we're trying to say that the tool that we're using is broken while also using the tool, then you can't really trust any of the conclusions that you're making. But also I was thinking that this also might mean that we don't understand the tool because glasses do distort your view. That's the point of them, so that you can see. Like if they don't change how I look, how I see, then they're not doing their job. And so it's like if we don't understand the going back to like if we don't understand the intent of the tool, then we're not going to be able to use it correctly.
Beautiful. Barakallah feek. By the way, this was a self-refuting loop we saw in naturalism earlier, that has a self-defeating logic. Anyway, whenever you put God on trial, let's say you can't explain a famine or some calamity that occurred to you, how's that fair? How dare God would do to me? Notice you're putting God on trial. And immediately this principle should be activated that if I'm going to say God is unfair, then the very ability to exercise this compass of fairness becomes a problem because it's coming from Him. And now you guys, what are the implications for us? Let's get to the implications. Go ahead. Is that written in your guidebook, Sister Zainab? No, there's nothing written there. So go ahead and put this down, y'all. Go ahead and read what's on the slide, Sister Zainab.
Implications. Do you understand now why Ibrahim alayhi salam never complained when he was asked to sacrifice his son?
You guys, can you think of anything more morally outrageous at the surface level than being asked to slaughter your son? But he doesn't rebel. Why? Because he knows his very sense of moral and immoral, fairness and fair and unfair. His very sense of outrage comes from Allah. It's like I can't use the tool God gave me to put God on trial. Otherwise, the tool itself would be undermined. And second thing Ibrahim alayhi salam understands, which is a really, really powerful point, and we're going to learn this again when we get to the problem of evil. You guys, and I'm going to reference the story of Musa alayhi salam and Khidr here. Another reason why Ibrahim alayhi salam doesn't complain is because he understands that between him and Allah is a massive knowledge gap. So God, with His complete total knowledge, may have a morally sufficient reason to allow some suffering that from your perspective doesn't seem justified. So in the story of Musa alayhi salam and Khidr, if you know the story, I'm not going to get into the entire story for the sake of time, but you guys remember when Khidr alayhi salam and Musa alayhi salam were riding on a boat together and someone gave them a free ride. It wasn't their boat, someone gave them a free lift. And when they got to the other side, Khidr alayhi salam broke a piece of the boat, a part of the boat, making it dysfunctional. Musa alayhi salam, with his limited knowledge, with his surface level knowledge at that point in time, was morally outraged. He's like, they gave us a free ride and you repay them back by breaking a piece of that ship, of that boat? Are you crazy? Have you lost it? Well, when finally they zoomed out, and now he didn't just have the pixel, but he had the picture, he realized why Khidr did what he did. Because there was a tyrant on the way to seize every functioning boat. And by Khidr alayhi salam breaking a piece of the boat, making it somewhat dysfunctional, saved the boat for the people who gave them the free ride. And with a little repair, the boat can be functional again. So, understand, knowledge gap is also an issue when it comes to a moral judgment. Okay, and then, you guys, go ahead and write, Sister Zainab, go ahead and read that for us as well.
Do you understand why the Prophet ﷺ never complained about the hardships of life as a prophet?
Our Prophet never became bitter towards Allah. God, I've dedicated my life for you. I was battered and bruised for you at Taif. I've lost my loved ones for you. How come I'm not getting 3 meals a day? How come we're suffering? How come 6 of my children died in my lifetime? Doesn't complain. Doesn't become resentful. Because he understands the knowledge gap. He understands that Allah is the reason there's a concept of fairness and unfairness in the first place. So he submits. And that is the literal meaning of Islam. What does Islam mean, y'all? To submit to Allah's knowledge and wisdom. Okay, so this right here is a powerful principle. Don't shoot yourself in the foot morally. And I hope, inshallah, it helps you out. It really helps me out. It helps orient me and direct me. Alhamdulillah. So, with this in mind, inshallah, folks, we are ready to move on. The 5th argument. Sister Zainab, whenever you're ready, go ahead.
God is the best explanation for human consciousness and will. The consciousness argument.
Here we go. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله ولتنظر نفس ما قدمت لغد واتقوا الله إن الله خبير بما تعملون ولا تكونوا كالذين نسوا الله فأنساهم أنفسهم أولئك هم الفاسقون. Go ahead and read the translation for us, Sister Zainab.
Believers, be mindful of Allah and let every soul consider carefully what it sends ahead for tomorrow. Be mindful of God, for God is well aware of everything you do. And do not be like those who forget Allah, so Allah causes them to forget their own souls. They are indeed the corrupt.
You guys, this ayah that we're studying and this argument that we're starting, we're going to look at this ayah at the end of the argument again, and it will strike you like a hammer when we're done with this argument. And just right now, inshallah, just to set things up a little bit for you, notice based on this ayah, in Islam, what makes you you is your soul. What makes you uniquely human is the soul inside of you, not your outer physical body. As one of the poets said it so beautifully, he said, أقبل على نفسك واستكمل فضائلها فإنك بالنفس ولا بالجسم إنسان. It's like, focus on your soul and refine that. Because you are a human being, not because of this outer shell of a body. It's because of the soul inside of you. And notice what this ayah tells you. And this is the hammer that's going to come up again and again. When you forget Allah, you start to forget what makes you human. What makes you different from an animal. What makes you different from a machine and cold matter. This right here is the argument from consciousness. You guys, let us begin, as we always do, by defining terms. So what, go ahead, Sister
What is consciousness?
You guys, let me just say this now. I've spent hours trying to figure out how to best help you understand consciousness because it's subtle, but it's so profound and powerful. And I'm hoping to get some awe moments, and I pray I'm successful in that. So let me first give you the textbook definition, and then inshallah we'll go deep. So here we go. What is consciousness? Go ahead, Sister Zainab.
Consciousness is the inner awareness we have of ourselves and our surroundings. It's that felt experience.
So consciousness is that, in other words, consciousness is the individual awareness you have of yourself and everything around you. It's the sense of being alive and lively. To contrast this, like the computer I'm using right now, it's on, it's functioning, it's computing, but it's not self-aware. It doesn't feel anything, doesn't experience anything, but you do. You experience the taste of feta cheese and smell of coffee and beauty of nature and meaning of words and the thrilling feel of a roller coaster. As one of the philosophers, he puts it so nicely. I love the way he phrases it. Look at what he says. Sister Zainab, go ahead.
David Eagleman, consciousness is that thing that flickers to life when you wake up.
When we wake up, all of a sudden you become aware and a mental movie-like experience of life begins. That's what consciousness is. And that's another phrasing I really like to use, the mental movie-like experience that we have. Now, let me give you two examples, y'all, that really help you solidify what we mean by consciousness. Yeah? So, go ahead and write these examples down. I believe I hopefully gave room for that in your guidebook. Let me see. I have not. So try to maybe squeeze in or at least reference these two examples in your definition of consciousness. You guys, here are two of my favorite examples to help you appreciate just how subtle and how beautiful consciousness is. So here's the first one. Imagine you are hiking in the woods and there's breathtaking scenery all around. And like a true Gen Z, you pull out your phone, even though you got no signal, but you are preparing for your IG content, and you start recording. What happens? Now pay attention to me on this. Hopefully you're not busy writing stuff down. Pay attention to this. As you are recording this video, the very photons, the same photons that are going through your eyes, are now going through the eye of your phone, which we call camera. The same sound waves that are going through your ears are going through the ears of your cell phone, what we call the mic. The same electrical signals that your brain processes are now being processed by the CPU in your phone. But here's a catch. You experience the photons and the scene in this mental movie-like manner, but your phone doesn't. It doesn't feel. It doesn't experience. It just records. The music that's playing in your car, it moves you. You experience the beauty, but my Beamer doesn't. Why? Because you have a mind, and you need a mind to experience. Yeah. Mind is what gives you that consciousness. That's what gives you that inner subjective experience and awareness. What redness feels like, what coffee tastes like. In my case, what dirty diapers smell like. That all comes with consciousness. Here's another example that really beautifully captures the property of consciousness. You guys imagine you have iBooks on your laptop or phone, and you have Siri read out loud the words on the iBook or whatever book that you're reading. Now, you guys, we know Siri has encyclopedia of knowledge at her disposal. She knows the definitions of those words. She can look them up for you. But you alone experience the story, the meaning. You're moved to tears. Siri doesn't. She can't experience. Why? Because you need consciousness for that. And you guys, I hope you're starting to appreciate what a blessing consciousness is. You and I are alive and aware. We experience things in a real sense. A robot is on and functioning, but a human is alive. And of the names of Allah, what is one of the names of Allah? Al-Hayy. In Ayat al-Kursi that we studied. Allahu la ilaha illahu al-Hayy. Allah, the truly alive, the greatest consciousness, and some aspect of that consciousness is given to you. Appreciate what a gift it is that you're not some inanimate, soulless robot. You get to experience the full show of life. Now, hopefully you're starting to appreciate what consciousness is. Sister Zainab, go ahead now.
Another way to understand consciousness, it is everything that separates us from machine and cold matter.
You guys, I want to go team by team. I want you to throw some aspects out to the best of your ability. What separates, and a beautiful way of understanding consciousness and how unique it is to see the contrast between us and machine and cold matter, or even animals. So, there are certain things that only humans have, and we credit that to consciousness. So, Team Abu Bakr, no, actually, let's start with Team Aisha. Team Aisha, throw some aspects. Did Team Aisha get their turn? I believe they got it, so it would be a lot cleaner if we just start from Team Abu Bakr. Or unless you guys object, I'm going to start from Team Abu Bakr. Team Abu Bakr, go ahead. Bismillah. What are some aspects? What separates us from cold matter? Okay, emotional intelligence is one. Okay, so can we just put it as ability, the capacity to experience emotion? So that could definitely be one, but I will give you half a point for that. Anything else, Team Abu Bakr? I need 2 from every team, ideally, and then inshallah we move on. 5, 4, 3, 2. Moral compass, very good. Our moral instinct, excellent, very good. So we'll put that down as well. And let's move on to Team Umar. Bara gets the full point. Rationality, well, what do you mean by rationality? If you're just saying intelligence, then, you know, someone could say, well, my robot is very intelligent. It's a smartphone for a reason. It's smart, right? Experience and memories, okay, but your phone has memories, Anas. You know what I'm saying? So give me some other stuff, folks. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay, Team Uthman, the question goes to you. What are some other aspects? Here's one that no one's told me yet. All right, I'm going to help you guys out with this one. Intentionality. This is the number one thing that separates a human being from machine. You have an independent intention. You can intend to act towards something of your own volition. So that's one. Happiness goes back to the emotional experience Bara told us, Anas. So we'll need something else. Team Uthman, 3, 2, 1. Wisdom. Okay, so okay, we're gonna go ahead and Osama and give you half a point for that. That's not bad. That's not bad. Adopting, but someone could argue that your phone can adapt to your, you know, how Siri adapts to your app preferences. So someone could chalk that up. Understanding information, now understanding language, experiencing meaning. That's a big one that I was hinting at earlier. Muhammad Mustafa will give you half a point. Now let's move on to Team Khadija and Team Aisha. What do you guys have for us? Here's another one for you. Will and agency. That is something uniquely human. Everyone experiences it different. Not all are hardcore to be the same, even though there are systems that govern our bodies are the same. Very nice, Sister Aina. Well put. Ability to detect beauty. Very nice. A beauty instinct. Sister Aina, half a point for you. Personal identity. You know, you have a sense of I. Machines don't. You have a personal identity. Anything else that comes to mind? Nurturing nature and worth. So ability to feel compassion. I would say that would go back to emotional capacity, Sister Zainab. So we're still looking for something a little more unique. Keep going. What are some other things that separate us from machine and cold matters? The ability to form beliefs. We can abstract things. What about goals and aspirations? Yeah, the ability to ask questions and to be inquisitive, which goes back to experiencing meaning to some degree. Emotions and tears, that was mentioned. Thoughts and meaning, that was mentioned. Sense of morality was mentioned. Sense of beauty was mentioned. Sense of humor, which I guess kind of goes back to emotion, but I kind of wanted to highlight that. And one last thing, folks, one last thing that is so incredibly unique, and that is you dream, literally and metaphorically. Human beings, we have dreams, and you literally dream. Amazing. You guys, let me tell you this, subhanAllah, having studied consciousness in this manner, now I watch my kid grow up, and subhanAllah, you see consciousness in action. You see his imagination when he pretend cooks, his ability to experience meaning and language and how he's naming things now, his ability to show love. You know, when I'm preparing for class, he'll come, Ibrahim, and now he's learned the word come. It's like, come. He's like, come, Dad, come. And he'll stretch it out because he really wants to drag me out and go play with him. And the genuineness in that because this is coming from a heart, not just from a soulless machine. And how he gets excited and thrilled, and you're in awe of the Creator who has given us this ability and capacity. You guys, this is what the world of artificial intelligence is stumped by right now. They're trying to figure out, how do you make a machine experience something? Experience meaning. How do you make it self-aware? And as we're going to learn, it's from the domains of Allah. We're still scratching the surface of the physical body and the physical world, let alone the domain of soul and consciousness. Allah has told us, as we're going to learn, it is going to always be beyond us. And this gives you some idea of the knowledge and power of Allah. You guys, one last thing before we move on to the argument. Can someone help me out quickly? What are some other words used for consciousness that are used interchangeably? Just, we want to make sure we get those down. And then, inshallah, we are ready to go. Here we go. What are some other words used for consciousness? Well, here's one that I'll quickly give it to you. Mind. Mind and consciousness are used interchangeably. Self-awareness, so that could be, I'm talking about as almost as a noun. Awareness is more like a property almost, but like in terms of like the entity of consciousness, mind, you could just say that human beings have a mind, and you're the soul. Very good. Soul is another word that's used, so that's a half a point for Sister Zainab. And let me see here, and Muhammad Mustafa will give you half a point as well. The self, to some degree, although that can be a little bit vague, but heart is often used in the popular culture. Oh, this person has a heart, for instance, meaning they have consciousness, meaning they have the ability to process emotions, which machines can. Okay, and then brain. Now, we're going to hold off to that because brain opens a can of worms, which we're going to get to in a second. In Arabic, the word ruh is used to refer to consciousness. And also the word nafs is used for consciousness. So you guys, these are 5 words that are used interchangeably when it comes to consciousness. So please go ahead and get those down just for your notes. So whichever I use, I am referring to consciousness as we just understood. Okay, having understood this, I always like to give an opportunity if someone wants to earn points. Any brave souls to help us paraphrase what consciousness is? What do you understand from consciousness? Anas, let's go. Let's see what you got.
So the way I would paraphrase consciousness, first of all, I would take machine and human. And machine number 1 doesn't feel anything that we feel, doesn't dream anything that we dream, and basically doesn't do the emotional stuff that we're capable of doing. Mm-hmm. Another way to paraphrase consciousness is the ability to experience things first-handedly and think about the experience later on, and create different ideas to that experience, create different feelings for that experience, because somebody might be sad from that experience, but somebody might be happy from that specific.
I like that. Well put. Half a point for you. Anybody else wants to paraphrase what you understand from the uniqueness of consciousness, and what is this subtle thing called consciousness? Amr, what do you got?
I was actually thinking, I want to make a point, but please correct me if I'm wrong. So can you also say consciousness can also be like the ability to understand someone else's feelings? Like humans have the ability to understand,
that's part of consciousness, but I wouldn't define consciousness by it. That's like saying, what is an iPhone? It captures photos. Well, that's one aspect of it, but it's not the whole thing, you see?
I was just trying to figure out how can I expand on it.
Yes. No, Amir, for your benefit, a lot of people, whenever they're asked to explain something, they give examples or features, which is good. But you want to get to the essence of it, and which is why it's hard to articulate, and that's why I gave so many examples. In your own time, in your review sessions, try to articulate what consciousness is. What is this property right there? Mason, you're the last one, and then inshallah we're moving on.
Inshallah. I would say it's our ability, like Ennis said, to experience the world around us, not just detect it, and use what we experience to plan our actions, to make judgments on events in the world around us, and change and do everything that humans can and machines are not capable of.
I love what you said, is the ability to experience and not just detect. Wow, that's powerful. Because your Tesla can detect the object in front of it, but it doesn't experience it. Ooh, I love it. Fantastic. Half a point for you, Mason. Or you guys, with this in mind, inshallah, let us begin with this powerful argument now that you understand the term, what consciousness, what we mean by it, now, inshallah, we are ready to construct the argument. You guys were about to get into the ring with the naturalists. Let me now show you how this becomes a potent argument for us. Allow me now to introduce to you the greatest mystery in modern science, what we call the hard problem of consciousness. This right here, folks, is a massive problem for a naturalist. It almost single-handedly decimates their worldview. What is this hard problem of consciousness? Go ahead, Sister Zainab.
How do electrical signals and chemicals in your head produce this human awareness and experience?
You guys, how do you think a naturalist responds to this? What is their response to where consciousness, what is consciousness, or where is it coming from to a naturalist? They only have one response. There's only one game in town for them, and that is, it's a one-word response, quickly. What is consciousness to a naturalist? How do they explain this particular question right here? Neurotransmitters, very good. Or in one word, a naturalist would likely say, it's your brain. Very good, Rafi. Brain is the consciousness. That's what it is. They reduce it. They have to reduce it to your brain. So, in other words, for a naturalist, listen to me on this. It's not that you have a brain. You are a brain. You are nothing but a pack of neurons. It's just brain wiring. And that's what produces this perception or this illusion of consciousness. The thing is, if it was that simple, it wouldn't be a hard problem. It wouldn't be the greatest mystery in modern science. Let me tell you why you can't just say, is your brain. Sister Zainab, go ahead and read this for us.
Brain is carbon molecules and neurons. We have no reason to believe an individual brain atom or cell is self-aware. A neuron cell is essentially the same as your liver cells or your kidney cells.
This is something I already gave you in your guidebook, so alhamdulillah, it saves you some muscle pain from getting all of this down. But yeah, think about that. You know, a brain is composed of atoms, and an individual atom we have no reason to believe is self-aware. Just like we have no reason to believe individual cells are self-aware. So, and by the way, adding just more cells will no more produce consciousness than adding transistors on a CPU will all of a sudden turn it into Jarvis. It's the same chemistry and electricity. So we asked the naturalists, Sister Zainab, go ahead whenever you're ready, and you guys can go ahead and put this in your guidebook as well, in the middle section.
How does lifeless matter of protons, neutrons, and electrons create consciously alive beings who are self-aware and can introspect about their own existence?
Very good. Keep reading. And then
If the electrical circuitry and chemistry that runs your washing machine isn't conscious, why is the electrical circuitry and chemistry in our heads conscious?
There you go. Go ahead, inshallah, go ahead and document all these 3 points in your guidebooks. The first one should be done for you. The second and the third, please go ahead and commit them to your notes. This is why this is called the hard problem of consciousness. That how does mind arises from matter? Matter, by definition, is non-conscious. It is not alive. An electron and photons don't experience anything. Just like we know Siri and Alexa don't experience anything. Like your phones don't experience the video. Yet if you're composed of the same basic elements, then why do you experience anything at all? This is what you call the hard problem of consciousness. Here, one of the great philosophers of the mind puts it so nicely. Sister Zainab, whenever you're ready, if you guys need me to go back, I will. Sister Zainab, otherwise, go ahead and read for us.
How could a series of physical events, little particles jostling against one another, electric current rushing to and fro and so on, blossom all of a sudden into a conscious experience? Why should any experience emerge from molecular biological processes?
There you go. So well put. And it's already written down for you as well. I'm going to go back to the notes because I was requested to. So go ahead and take a few more seconds, y'all, and get this down. Anas, go ahead. You had a question?
I actually had a comment for this
Yes.
because it's just kind of mind-boggling me, because if you think about it, if you want to look at it that way, you're just kind of like sculpting and putting together some like matter and then telling it to think and telling it to dream.
Yes. Yes. Isn't that crazy? You see the chasm between matter and mind? It's like, how does it arise from the other? And this is the hard problem of consciousness. I hope it's hitting you guys by now. Just how profound of a mystery this is. This is the greatest mystery in modern science right now. And I want us to get into this, y'all. Now, here's David Chalmers, who's arguably one of the he's a world-renowned cognitive scientist and a philosopher. Look at what he says, and you appreciate the honesty. Sister Zainab, go ahead.
The hard problem of explaining consciousness is one of the most puzzling in all of science and philosophy. And at the present time, there are no solutions that command any sort of consensus.
Here's another philosopher that puts it so nicely. Why is consciousness so baffling?
Julia, we've just met, but we have something in common. We've both been obsessed with consciousness our whole lives. I did a PhD in neurophysiology, and I don't think I understood consciousness any more when I finished the degree than when I started the degree. Why is consciousness so baffling?
Because it's everything we have, all we are. So when I need to talk about consciousness, like now, I always say, what is it first, so we understand what it is. And as I said, it is everything. I define it as what goes away in the evening when you go to sleep and comes back the next morning when you wake up.
Oh, I love that definition. You guys catch that? So nicely put. Here we go. Let's do it one more time.
So we understand what it is. And as I said, it is everything. I define it as what goes away in the evening when you go to sleep and comes back the next morning when you wake up. And sometimes it comes back during the night when you dream. So consciousness is all we experience. And now, of course, if you eliminate experience from everything else, nothing is left as far as each of us is concerned. So experience means all the sounds and sights of life. It means all the feelings you might have had, will have, all the thoughts, all the wishes. Of course, it means yourself, your friends, your country, your place in the world. Everything is an experience. There's nothing but an experience for each of us. So that's consciousness. And if we weren't in a way for sleep and sometimes for anesthesia, we probably wouldn't even know that it is such an extraordinary gift, how else to call it. Meaning, if it weren't there, for each of us, there would be nothing at all. In fact, none of us would exist.
You know, notice what he said? It's like if we didn't have sleep, where consciousness just turns off, you wouldn't even appreciate consciousness. It's kind of like, you know, when the fan is running in the background and the noise is coming, it's only when the fan stops, you're like, wow, it just got super quiet. You see the contrast, and we appreciate things in contrast. So, yeah, Sister Sana, we're going to come back to that point. You're a little bit ahead of the curve, but yes, we're going to come back to that point. You guys, if you understood the hard problem of consciousness, here we are, folks. So here we go. We are now going to defend two major contentions, and my goal is to finish this argument in the next half hour, take a break, and then move on to the Fitrah argument. Now that you understand the problem, it's time to construct the argument. Two major statements that we're going to defend. Sister Zainab, go ahead.
Islamic theism has the explanatory power to explain human consciousness. Naturalism does not have the explanatory scope to accommodate consciousness, hence it's either denied or treated as an illusion.
There you go. So let's begin then. Let's begin with the first statement that we're going to defend, inshallah. You guys, really for a Muslim, it's really a no-brainer. God is the ultimate consciousness, Al-Hayy, and He has invested us with a level of consciousness. I'm going to now what I'm going to do, I'm going to put up some ayat of the Quran, and y'all tell me what aspect of consciousness is being recognized or affirmed. So we're going to go team by team. If anybody can tell me what team we're on, I believe we went through all the teams, so I'm going to once again start with Team Abu Bakr. So we're unless someone corrects me. So once again, I'm going to do the first one for y'all. Okay, just to get the ball rolling. Look at the different aspects of consciousness the Quran refers to, so our bases are properly covered. Here we go. Allah says, go ahead, Sister Zainab, Bismillah.
God said to the angels, when I have fashioned the human being physically and breathed a soul, especially from me, into him, then honor him through prostration.
Then honor him through prostration. You guys, this right here immediately affirms that soul is some sort of an immaterial reality. Yeah. It is some sort of a immaterial reality. It's not just, you are not just physics and chemistry. That there's some immaterial substance inside of you. And this is why it's so hard for a naturalist, because they're not even open to that possibility. And by the way, this right here also explains why human beings have certain qualities that God ascribes to himself. God is beautiful. One of the names of Allah is Al-Jamil. We appreciate beauty. God creates in some shape or form, in some minute form we create. God loves, so we have the ability to love. You can only give what you have. So these qualities that we have and these experiences that we have, they are well accommodated on our worldview because there is an ultimate source for it. On naturalism though, matter by definition is unconscious, yet it produces consciousness. You can't give what you don't have. So that is the first one. All right, Team Abu Bakr, tell me which aspect of consciousness is being affirmed here? Go ahead, Sister Zainab.
It is God who brought you out of your mother's wombs knowing nothing and gave you hearing and sight and consciousness so that you might be thankful.
What aspect of consciousness, and we saw a bunch of them earlier, which one's accommodated, folks? 5, Team Abu Bakr, 4, 3, 2, and I've highlighted some of the words for you so you can make the connection. Gratitude and feelings. But gratitude belongs to what category? What is gratitude? Under what category does it fall quickly? 3, 2, 1. Emotions. Very good. So our emotional capacity is being affirmed. Go ahead and get that down in your notes as well. Thank you very much. So that's a full point for Rafi. We're moving on to the next ayah. Go ahead, Sister Zainab, read that for us.
You who believe, be mindful of God and let every soul consider carefully what it sends ahead for tomorrow.
All right. So, Team Umar, which aspect of consciousness just got affirmed and acknowledged? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. Introspection. Not bad. Not bad. But there's something even more fundamental. Oh, Sister Zainab kind of took it. But yes. Free will and agency, intentionality is part of free will. That is being acknowledged. So Mason will give you half a point, and Sister Zainab, we can't give you a point yet, but inshallah we're coming to you. Okay, so that leads me to the next ayah, and that is Allah says. Go ahead, Sister Zainab.
Sorry, by the way. Indeed, we have created man, and we know whatever thoughts his inner self developed.
And we lost her. Okay, I'm going to read for her until she's able to kind of come through. Indeed, folks, what aspect of free... wait, is it my internet that's unstable, or is it... It is? Okay. Is it better now? Okay, very cool. Sister Zainab, go ahead and read the well, I actually read the fourth one. So you guys, this question goes to Team Uthman then. Team Uthman, help me out. What aspect of consciousness just got affirmed? 5, 4, 3, 2. We didn't hear you. Okay, so, well, the verse is in front of you, hopefully. We have created man, and we know whatever thoughts his inner self develops, and we are closer to him than his jugular vein. Team Uthman, quickly, what aspect of consciousness is being recognized? Forming beliefs. Okay, there's something even more fundamental. Keep peeling the layers there, Osama, and the rest of y'all. Yes, 3, 2. Thoughts and meaning. Very nice. Awareness and meaning. That's pretty close, Osama. I'll take that one. We'll give you a point for that. Fantastic, fantastic. And of course, the last one. Go ahead, Sister Zainab. Bismillah.
Prophet, they ask you about the soul. Say, the soul is part of my Lord's domain, and you have been given very little knowledge.
Okay, and so I open this up to Team Khadija. Team Khadija, what aspect of... Okay, so this is not an aspect of consciousness that's being recognized. It's almost an unfair question. I'll ask you guys the next 2 questions, so I'll just give this one. Allah's telling you it'll remain a hard problem. because it's from the domain of Allah and He has intentionally given you very little knowledge. Physical world, you have been given perhaps a little more knowledge because Allah has subjugated that for us. سَخَّرْنَاهَا لَكُمْ. But here, this will always remain a hard problem. Okay, with this in mind, we are moving down to the next thing. Go ahead, Sister Zainab, Bismillah.
Logically speaking,
you guys, this is a quick logical argument to prove the existence of a soul or consciousness, that it's real, it's not an illusion. Have you guys ever noticed, Sister Zainab, go ahead.
have you noticed how you intuitively separate between the brain and the mind, your body and you?
Have you heard of people say, for instance, I don't like my body? Where they separate I from the body. Or nowadays we hear this a lot because of the trans movement. I'm in the wrong body. Have you heard of that one? But notice, once again, the point being, the I, the sense of self, is being separated very intuitively from the body and the outer shell. Or, here, check this out. When we're talking physically, have you noticed we say bike helmets prevent brain damage? We don't say mind damage. Once again, very intuitively we separate, very instinctively. Or for instance, when we're talking about something more metaphysical, like making a choice or decision, we say, I made up my mind to buy this bike, not I made up my brain. So, again, I feel like this is something that is built inside of us. We recognize and we're aware. It's very self-evident in that sense. So that's the first argument I would put, that this is something that we intuitively understand, is very obvious and self-evident to us. Now, here's a second argument for the existence of a soul and consciousness. That consciousness is real, this immaterial reality. You know, we can't just treat it as an illusion. And we're going to look at more and more evidences later, but this is just a quick logical argument. You guys, the most immediate and the most obvious thing to us is our conscious experience, as the philosopher and the scientist was telling us earlier. The sense of self, awareness, sensation, and so on and so forth. Even our scientific inquiries are filtered through our conscious experience. In other words, consciousness is the mental base for everything we experience, including science. So, if this most obvious thing is a deceptive illusion, as naturalism will have us believe, then what trust is left in any other human experience? If this mental base is not real, it's an illusion, then by extension, everything processed through it will be tainted by this illusion. And if the foundations of a building are shaky, then the whole thing will eventually shake. Once again, you see the self-refuting loop that they get into a lot, and you hope that they realize just on what contradictory grounds they stand upon. If my consciousness, which is everything to me, I can never step outside of my consciousness. If that's an illusion, if that is just phantomness that my mind creates, then other experiences which have to go through consciousness, they are kind of undermined indirectly. So that is a quick logical argument. If y'all can kind of get into your notes, I would appreciate it. And with this, I wanted to make a quick spiritual point before we inshallah move on to some incredibly emerging evidence to prove the existence of a soul or consciousness. You guys, spiritually speaking, I need y'all's help with this one. Have you noticed when it comes to sinfulness, have you noticed the types of words we use to describe sinful, wicked behavior? Here, take a look at this. We use words like cold-hearted. We say things like, he's stone cold, heartless, a monster, an animal. He doesn't feel anything. No morals, no conscience. Someone help me out with this. What do you notice about these words? What do they have in common? There's one common theme that kind of runs through them. 5, 4, 3. Sounds like a machine. Oh, well, Mason articulated out. We'll give Sister Zainab half a point as well.
No worries, inshallah. I was going to say sinfulness is it's basically everything that's rejecting that consciousness or the thing that makes you a conscious human being.
Yes. Well stated. And on the contrary, look at this. Righteousness. What words do we use? Oh, this person is warm-hearted, thoughtful, sensitive, sincere, mindful, conscientious, considerate, empathetic. And notice what's the common theme right there when it comes to righteous and praiseworthy behaviors? They all, I think you guys would agree with me, they all hint at different aspects of consciousness and soul. The thoughts, the emotions, the feelings, the mindfulness of it, the intentionality of it, the very things that make us human. And subhanAllah, something really, really powerful if you just reflect deeply upon the human reality. Because I've talked to people who have been immersed in sin. And these are the statements I come across over and over again. Here are things they tell me. Sister Zainab, read that for us, please.
They don't feel regret anymore. They are not moved by any religious talk or recitation. They have become numb to sins. Can't seem to shed tears. They have learned to ignore the guilt, and they are not thinking about the consequences.
Once again, what does it all sound like? Cold. You either sound like an animal or a cold, mindless machine. In other words, when you're away from Allah, you start losing your own humanity and become more and more like an animal, inanimate matter. And when you're closer to Allah, you become human in the fullest sense of the word. You start to embrace the soul God breathed into you. Does it remind you of an ayah we just came across at the beginning? When you forget Allah, you forget yourself. And that's the problem of naturalism. It wants to reduce the human being to that, to nothing more than matter and a biochemical machine. So it has massive spiritual consequences. Massive. Yeah. Anas, talk to us real quick.
SubhanAllah, this reminds me of Ramadan, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, don't eat, don't feed that physical body. I want you to feed your soul. You know? And in Ramadan, we're literally feeding our souls because we're remembering Allah, which is also in that ayah, but also feeding our souls in a sense that, you know, with the Quran, we're feeling more emotion. We're not letting physical things take over.
Amazing, amazing, beautiful, well stated. Thank you. Half a point for you, Anas. Kufr and being ungrateful comes from the same root. So when you commit sin or disbelief, then it's manifestation of that ungrateful for the gift of the ruh and life and consciousness that God gave you. Dang. Dropping gems. Yes, Mason. Thank you very much. So you guys, alhamdulillah, we have fairly comfortably defended the first statement. Islamic theism has the explanatory power and depth to accommodate the uniqueness of human consciousness. And now we move on to the second one. As we're going to learn, that naturalism sits very awkwardly with this variety of data of human experience that we call consciousness. They are either forced to deny it or explain it away as an illusion. So here we go. Sister Zainab, go ahead, Bismillah. Read both of them for us.
On naturalism, everything must be reduced to a physical, clockwork-like explanation. And because it's hard to explain consciousness in this manner, they are forced to deny it or treat it as an illusion created by the brain.
Or, of course, if it gets too awkward,
science will figure it out.
Science will eventually figure it out. Well, you know what? There are certain things that are beyond the scope of science. And because they're not even open to that possibility, because physical reality is the only reality, look at how they talk about consciousness. I want you to watch your own intuitive reaction. And by the way, intuition is powerful. That's what common sense is that intuitive engine, that logical engine God has built into you. Look at Francis Crick. Look at the way he talks about consciousness and feel your own reaction. Bismillah. Go ahead, Sister Zainab.
Your joys and your sorrows, your memories and your ambitions, your sense of personal identity and free will are in fact no more than the behavior of a vast assembly of nerve cells and their associated molecules.
We're hopelessly tied to genetics and brain chemistry. And of course, it gets worse and fairly obnoxious. Alex Rosenberg is not just an atheist, but he's a militant atheist. He writes a book called The Atheist's Guide to Reality. I just literally took a passage from his book for y'all's reference. So he says, here is a list of the questions and their short answers. Sister Zainab, let's do this.
Is there a God? No. What is the nature of reality? What physics says it is. What is the purpose of the universe? There is none. What is the meaning of life? Ditto. Why am I here? Just dumb luck. Is there a soul? Are you kidding? Is there free will? Not a chance.
So we're just soulless zombies enslaved to the physical workings of our brain. And of course, he says, go ahead.
What is the difference between right and wrong? There is no moral difference between them.
And you know the irony of everything he just said? I don't know if you guys are catching on to the irony. The very act of writing this book is a purposeful act. If the backdrop of everything is purposelessness, your very act of writing a book is really just artificial makeup you're putting on reality when reality itself has no purpose. Oh, check this out. Writing for an audience presupposes their ability to freely choose a worldview, and you're denying free will. Rationality itself presupposes a free choice to choose a position. And of course, saying there is no meaning itself meant as a meaningful statement. So, I mean, the ironies are just insane. So, yeah. And by the way, you think this is pretty preposterous, yeah? Watch this. Look how far they are willing to go to deny consciousness and what makes you uniquely human. Watch this. David Smith writes an article called Natural Born Liars. He's referring to human beings. Okay, so here we go. Watch what he says.
David argues that self-deceit, where we experience consciousness through there is no such thing on naturalism, arose from the need to deceive others for survival, because the most convincing way to deceive others is to deceive oneself.
Okay, so I know there's a bunch of words being repeated. You know what he's saying, right? He's trying to explain the phenomenon. Why is it that we experience consciousness when there is no such thing? It's an illusion, right? Why is it that our brains trick us into thinking we have consciousness? He said the reason is, the evolutionary purpose of that is self-deceit. We learn to deceive ourselves. Our brains learn to deceive us, or the brain learns to deceive itself, because you kind of need that to survive, because eventually you'll have to deceive others. And at that point, you're like, you don't know how to have a proper conversation with these people. So let me go back to the previous slide for those of you who we went too fast for. Get this slide down. It is right into your notebook or into your guidebook. Get his answers that will fill in the blanks, that will fill the blanks for you. And of course, the irony. There should be a section for irony as well on the bottom. I'll give a few seconds to get that down. Yeah, this is how, man, this is how bleak, grim reality becomes on this worldview, man. Yeah, like Anas, you were saying, such a boring lifestyle. Yeah. Okay, hopefully that was enough. Otherwise, I will send the notes, inshallah, for y'all. So, by the way, one thing I really wanted to share, it's not in your guidebook. The thought occurred to me later, and I thought it was really profound, so I thought I would share with you. Sister Zainab, go ahead.
This is why I feel Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the phenomenon of sleepwalking.
Yeah. You know why I say this, folks? Had naturalism been true, if they are right, that we are nothing more than just the physics of our brain, and we are just dancing to the tunes of our genetics and the stimuli in the environment, then that's how human beings would be, soulless machines without experience or awareness. Did you know when you sleepwalk, your eyes are open? Stimulus is coming in. Your motor sensory functions are on. You can perform complex tasks. We're told that. But you're not aware. You're not experiencing, just like a machine doesn't experience. Islamically, we know why. Because your soul leaves the body at night. So your consciousness is gone. It leaves you. So even though you can perform bodily tasks, like a biochemical, electrochemical machine, like a robot, you don't experience. You know how powerful that is? That's what we would be if naturalism is true. Ya Allah, thank God we're not. Yeah. That's the analogy that occurred to me, and I really wanted to share that with you. I've heard things like people have driven cars when they're sleepwalking. They've taken a shower when they're sleepwalking. Opening fridge, closing it. So it's, yeah, but while all that's happening, no experience. So with this in mind, we move on, inshallah, to the next point, which is, go ahead, Bismillah.
Evidence from scientific studies is mounting that you are more than just a brain.
You guys, alhamdulillah, we have mounting scientific evidence that consciousness can't just be reduced to your brain. To bury naturalism, we gotta beat them at their own game. So allow me to share with you 4 pieces of scientific evidence that very convincingly show that you are more than just a brain, that there's something immaterial inside of you. Ready for this? Here we go. First one is Wilder Penfield studies. Sister Zainab, you just have to read through this particular slide, inshallah. Bismillah, go ahead.
Dr. Penfield was an American-Canadian neurosurgeon who is considered one of the founding figures in brain surgical techniques. He specialized in epilepsy surgeries and would study patient behaviors by stimulating various regions of the brain through electrodes. He started out as a naturalist, ended his career as a passionate dualist.
What's a dualist? Dualist is someone who holds the view that human beings are composed of 2 elements. There's a physical element and there is a immaterial non-physical element. And that's what Muslims are. We believe Allah created us from ruh and jasad, 2 in 1 that kind of comes together. So with this in mind, go ahead and read this for us.
Through electrode stimulation, he would cause the patients to raise their arms, move their legs, say a word, or even see a flash of light. However, despite 30 years of experimentation, he realized that he could never stimulate agency and will on part of his patients.
Which is, again, a direct component of consciousness. And now watch this is so powerful in my opinion. Go ahead.
While they couldn't even see what he was doing, he would stimulate their nerves, causing them to raise their hands, and he would ask them what just happened. Invariably, they would say it was done to them and did not occur from them.
Drop a hashtag, folks. How does this show that there's something beyond just the brain here? 5, someone who I have not yet heard from. 4, 3, reading this, analyzing this, how does this support our case? It's very important, once again, to be able to use evidence and you be able to use that evidence and process it to make our case. So, Barak, can you articulate that out?
So they said it wasn't done, or they would say it was done to them and did not occur from them. So it wasn't a mindful action that they did. It kind of was their body's reaction to something that stimulated them.
Yes, yes. In other words, it wasn't genuinely their soul that did it. That distinction still remained. That's powerful. Yeah, no intention. No intention. Very good, but we'll give you half a point for that one. Wilder Penfield himself writes in his famous book, The Mystery of the Mind. He says, go ahead, Sister Zainab.
But none of the actions we attribute to the mind have been initiated by electrode stimulation. If there is a mechanism in the brain that could do what the mind does, one might expect that the mechanism would betray its presence in a convincing manner.
Here we go. And this now allows us, by the way, let me give you a few moments to let me go back to the previous slide. Again, please don't write down word for word, but just capture the key elements. I recall Sister Sana Shakir sent a visual of her notes, and you saw how brief shorthand notes they were. That's kind of what you're going for. Just bullet points that capture the main point. Especially the last line I would capture in Wilder Penfield Studies section in your guidebook. Okay, so let me give you a few moments. And with this, we are moving on, inshallah, of split brain studies. Okay, here we go. Gets freaky, folks. Here we go. Sister Zainab, Bismillah.
These are patients whose 2 hemispheres of the brain are cut off. Specifically, the bundle of fibers connecting the 2 halves are severed to reduce the likelihood of seizures. Roger Sperry conducted Nobel Prize-winning research in 1981 to determine which side of the hemisphere specialized in which function.
Team Khadija, help us out. What do we expect on naturalism to occur when brain is split in half? 5, 4, 3. If we are nothing more than a brain, that is what we are. What do we expect to occur on naturalism when the brain is split in half? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, moving the question to Team Aisha. Team Aisha, what do we expect to occur on naturalism when the brain is split? Yes. Here we go. Sister Zainab, help us out.
If we're just, a mass of chemicals and wiring and whatnot. If we disrupt that, then nothing, like there will be no more brain function. Like everything would just stop.
Well, so maybe I wouldn't go all the way far, but at the very least, could we say, at the very least, things would get really glitchy? Like your sense of self, free will, agency will be compromised, right? We're not saying it will entirely shut down, but at the very least, the things that you associate with the mind, that we at least associate with the mind, such as my sense of self, my awareness, it'll be very, very trippy and skippy and glitchy. So, what happens? Roger Sperry himself concludes. Bismillah. Whenever you're ready, Sister Zina.
He concludes that although speech, perception, and other functions are somewhat interrupted or hindered, these patients following surgery appear in ordinary, everyday behaviors to be typical, single-minded, normally unified individuals.
Single-minded and normally unified individuals. And then Dr. Michael Egnar, a neurosurgeon, listen to what he says. Go ahead. He's commenting on Roger Sperry's research. Go ahead.
Remarkable thing is that Roger Sperry, had to do Nobel Prize level research to discover any difference at all. What he discovered are perceptual differences, which are very subtle. But your intellect, your will, and your sense of self is still unitary, even though your brain is split in half.
Yeah. It's unreal, folks. And the next one is like a death blow. I didn't share this last year. So this is brand new content for Dismantling Doubts, 2021 version. And then I'll take y'all's reflections. Actually, Sister Noura, let's hear from you because we haven't heard from you.
So after like the first version of Dismantling Doubts, like I was in Intro to Psych and we like watched a video of a dude that had this procedure done. And it was so cool because he was just like basically like nothing had ever happened to him. Like he like had a job, like doing the interview, like killing it. Like you could never tell that his brain was like in half. It was so cool.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. And folks, this next one, it's kind of freaky. But it's unreal, man. Listen to this. Cases of hydrocephalus. Are you ready for this? Here we go. Go ahead, Sister Zainab. Do justice to this.
In 2007, The Lancet, one of the world's oldest and best-known medical journals, published the following. A 44-year-old man from France started experiencing weakness in his leg. Upon examining him, doctors told him he was missing part of his brain. The man's skull was
He was missing?
Part of his brain.
You mean
most of his brain, sorry.
Yes,
most of his brain, not part. The man's skull was full of liquid with just a thin layer of brain tissue left.
And this is the actual picture of his brain. See that black in the middle? That's the liquid. It's completely hollow, filled with liquid, and only brain left is that thin layer that you see on the side. Folks, what do we expect on naturalism here? Serious system errors. Can we at least say that? Like unreal type of weird things happening. It's like when your computer malfunctions and freezes. Like you expect that type of ridiculous behavior. Okay, so now watch what they discovered. He was living a normal life with a family, and he managed to get a score of 80 in IQ testing, which, by the way, is the average result that people get. And this is, now you might think this is an isolated case, so we don't want to read too much into it. Fair enough. Okay, let's continue, Sister Zainab.
In 1986, Dr. John Lorber from Sheffield University scanned the brain of a 126 IQ scoring math student. The CAT scan revealed that the student virtually had no brain.
Wow. I mean, if this person is that smart with like 10% of his brain, sounds like an Asian, right? Mashallah. Let's move on to, so go ahead and now continue.
Dr. Lorber systematically studied hydrocephalus and documented over 600 cases of people with this condition.
Man. So there you go. Go ahead and get this down. Yeah, I think that's a myth, right? This whole 10% of your brain and okay, there you go, Sister Sana, mashallah, ahead of the curve. Go ahead and you guys get this down. The cases of hydrocephalus. Inshallah, I will send I'll send once again my slides for those of you who are trying to capture all this, and you're getting FOMO, inshallah, we'll get the slides out. So once again, try to capture just key points right now. It's 12:35. I'm going to show you the last case, and then hopefully we're ready to take a break. Okay, so with this in mind, near-death experiences. This gets spiritual, man. So, Bismillah, Sister Zainab, whenever you're ready, go ahead.
Near-death experiences. These are patients who are pronounced clinically dead due to cardiac arrest and their brains were anoxic, out of oxygen and unconscious. Clinical death is a state in which vital signs have ceased, the heart is in ventricular fibrillation, there is a total lack of electrical activity on the cortex of the brain, so a flat EEG, and a brainstem activity is abolished.
All right, once again, just put into the chat box, on naturalism, what do we expect to happen here, folks? 5, 4, this is not for points, but just to establish some baseline expectations. On naturalism, we expect to what do we have to expect to happen? Can we say a total blackout? Just like a computer is switched off, you should be switched off. Okay, now, here we go. Watch the studies on this. Here we go. If you can read the name of the study as well, Sister Zainab, just to give it credibility.
Tim Van Lommel, Near-Death Experience and Survivals of Cardiac Arrest, a Prospective Study. Conducted a study of 344 heart attack survivors within a week of their resuscitation. 62 patients reported recollection from the time they were clinically dead.
Now watch that breakdown.
50% reported awareness of being dead.
They were aware? The awareness is still there, although body is dead. And they're aware that they're dead, which is the crazy part. And then
30% reported moving through a tunnel or an observation of a celestial landscape or meeting with deceased relatives. And about 25% had an out-of-body experience.
And there's no electrical activity in the brain. That's the crazy part at this point. And then
13% experienced a life review.
This is not the only study. There's another study conducted by Michael Sabam, a cardiologist, Life, Light, and Death. He says it, 1998. Go ahead.
Over 2 years, Sabam interviewed and surveyed 160 patients who were revived after being announced clinically dead post-cardiac arrest. To ensure their accounts weren't compromised, he drew mostly from patients in his own clinical practice who he could interview soon after resuscitation. He discovered that out of 160, nearly 47 had near-death experiences. These Atlanta-based patients reported near-death experiences similar to those Van Lommel's Dutch patients.
And there's one particular account, subhanAllah, that you guys, I wanted to make sure you appreciate. So Zainab, go ahead and do justice to this. Here we go.
One patient's account from the Van Lommel's patients. In About the Continuity of Our Consciousness, Von Lommel reports a case in which a coronary care nurse removed dentures from a 44-year-old comatose heart attack victim and placed them in a drawer in the crash cart. Later, the patient was revived by CPR, and a week later, the nurse saw him again in the cardiac ward. She reports, the moment the patient sees me, he says, "There's the nurse who knows where my dentures are." I was very surprised. Then the patient clarifies, "You were there when I was brought into the hospital and you took my dentures out of my mouth and put them into that cart. It had all these bottles on it and there was this sliding drawer underneath and there you put my teeth." Nurse, I was shocked because I remember this happening while the man was in a deep coma.
There you go. These are near-death experiences where for whatever reason the brain is off, but awareness is not. Brain is off, consciousness is not. Now, we have to quickly take one objection. I know some of you are probably still writing this down. So, do we know if soul has a physical location in the body? The answer, that's a very, very profound question. The answer, there's a hint in a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ when he describes what happens when the soul is being taken out. And one of the comments he makes, especially about someone who's wicked, is that the soul does not want to leave the body. And as the soul is coming out, it's like you're ripping a piece of cotton from a plant with a lot of thorns. It's on its way out, it's ripping every nerve and fiber. So it seems this soul is somehow imbued into every aspect of the body. Some scholars have said, just like, you know how in your room there's a light bulb? The light is everywhere in the room, but there is that ultimate tethering point. Some say heart is the tethering point of the soul, but it permeates into every aspect of your physical body. So Allahu Alam, we have been given very little knowledge in this regard. Anas, quickly, question?
Question was about this, like one of Van Lommel's patients. So this man was in deep coma, wasn't there, eyes closed, everything, but knew where the dentures were.
Yes. While he's in a state of deep coma, the brain activity isn't there, yet somehow he knew what was happening in his surrounding. And that's the part that the nurse was just like, and this is why von Lamel and others, Michael Sabam, they did these studies because they were seeing it over and over again where physically someone's gone, but mentally they have not. So if all you are is your brain, then why shouldn't there be a total blackout on part of everyone? So with this in mind, can soul be removed from before body stops, aka life support? What is Islamic view on that? So this goes into the discussion of euthanasia, where if someone is in a vegetative state and the doctors have pronounced and given the verdict that there's no room, there's no hope of them returning, then in Islam the key principle is seeking medication is not a... Okay, this is a very complicated discussion, so let me just drop this here, and I'm not going to be able to go into the nuance. But in Islam, seeking medical treatment is not a wajib. So family members can decide to remove that medication if, once again, there's no clear linkage that can be established between their ultimate revival and the medication. So in that situation, life plug can be pulled. So, but anyway, there are a lot of conditions to it. There are a lot of nuances to it. So this is a very, very complex discussion. You guys, let me quickly entertain a objection from Nancy the naturalist. Go ahead, Sister Zainab. Bismillah.
If Nancy the naturalist says, we have cases where brain damage changes personality, political preferences, loss of concern for others, and recklessness, how do you explain that?
Yeah, so Nancy has a good point here. She's like, well, look, personality is changing, and things like emotional things like recklessness and concern for others, that is being that is being hugely interrupted. So how do you explain that? If soul is what has that emotional capacity, then the person should have a consistent personality regardless of what changes occur to the brain, right? So that's a pretty good point. So how do we respond to this, folks? Anybody wants to take a crack at it? Quickly, 5, 4, 3, brain and soul link, unless you're onto something. So here's how we put it very, for the sake of time. We say mind, soul, whatever you want to call it. Mind is separate from the brain, not independent from the brain. Yeah. In other words, please get this down properly. The soul experiences whatever it experiences by relying on the data supply from the brain. So if the brain is damaged and it's not able to produce certain types of data due to damage, soul cannot experience those particular dimensions. So the analogy I like to give is, like, imagine if the guitar is broken. The musician cannot produce certain sounds. Not because the musician doesn't have the skill anymore, it's just the guitar is broken. So similarly, if your brain is like the guitar that the soul is operating upon, if the brain is damaged, there are certain tones and notes and experiences of sound it will never be able to produce. Same thing here. Keith Ward, one of the philosophers of mind, puts it really nicely. Go ahead, Sister Zainab, and then we'll take a question.
Analogy. Do you want me to read that part? Or
no, you can go
just
straight.
to Keith Ward. Keith Ward, mind/soul reads or interprets the configuration of neurons which store information that the brain has. This configuration is stored in the brain just as a symphony is stored on a CD.
Very good. And if the CD is damaged, then the sound will no longer be the same. Same thing occurs to those individuals. Amir, go ahead.
So my question was like, so if mind and soul, like, if they are separate from
No, not mind and soul. You mean mind and brain, yes?
Yeah, mind and brain.
Go ahead.
I was just having a hard time understanding that point from what you said before about the man being in a complete state of coma, but remembering everything that had happened because his soul experienced it.
So the question, if I am understanding it correctly, if the person's brain was off, how are they experiencing anything? You're saying?
Yeah.
So
Because you said like the soul experiences everything based on the data provided by the brain, right?
that's actually a very profound question. I don't know if you guys are able to see what Amr is asking here. If we're saying brain and the soul are tied, and you need the data supply from the brain to experience anything at all, then how come those people in near-death experiences, how are they experiencing anything? Brain is off. There's no power coming. There's no data coming. So then how is there any experience? The response is, okay, so this gets a little metaphysical, but you asked for it. Why do you dream at night when your body leaves the soul, or soul leaves the body? It seems, when the separation occurs between the body and the soul, either partially, which happens when you're sleeping, or completely when you're dead, when this partial or complete separation occurs, it seems the soul carries the remnants of that data with it. So it's kind of like, how do I say this, short-term memory versus long-term memory, but the imprints of the data, when the soul just kind of departs, it carries some of that data with it, so some level of experience kind of continues. That's really the best way to experiences. Another way of thinking about it as well is that when the soul leaves the body, it perhaps latches on to some internal source or some external source. We don't really know, metaphysically speaking, how that entirely occurs. But when they're connected, though, it is tied to the brain. It has to be tied to the brain. And therefore, you see the experiences that you do. Amir, hopefully that answers the question. It's a little bit complicated, but yeah, we have theories that we try to make sense of the data with in this regard. Okay, so yeah, I can't wait to ask God these questions. Fantastic. You guys, last thing that I wanted to share with you is the following. And here, please, listener discretion advised. I wanted to end this argument by sharing something very, very disturbing. It's very sensitive, but I felt that you needed to hear it. I wanted you to know the implications of denying consciousness and reducing human beings to just physics and chemistry. I won't read what's on the guidebook right now. I have taken key data points and put them on the slide for the sake of time. You guys, here we go. Sister Zainab, Bismillah, go ahead.
On April 5th, 2021, 19-year-old Farhan Tawid and his 21-year-old brother Tanvir gunned down 4 of their family members at their home in Allen, Texas, before killing themselves. Both brothers had entered a suicide pact. Shortly before committing this act, Farhan posted a 5-page suicide note on his Instagram. Here is an excerpt.
I want you to witness firsthand what naturalism and atheism can potentially lead to. What happens when you reduce human beings to just chemical activity in the head? So here are some of the key things, the key points from the suicide note that he posted. Go ahead, Sister Zainab.
Neurons are just the biological equivalent of transistors in computers. Consciousness is nothing but a byproduct of evolutionary luck.
We just lucked into existence, lucked into consciousness. Nothing is intentionally, purposefully designed. As you can see how heavily he's influenced by naturalism. Now, if there is, again, if you just lucked into existence, nothing is intentionally, purposefully designed, then obviously you're going to create your own artificial sense of purpose, yeah? That's exactly what he does. Watch what he says.
If the only reason to live is for happiness, then logically you shouldn't live if you aren't happy. That makes sense, right? Although I'm not in quite as bad of a situation, it's bad enough to warrant suicide. I live in so much pain and turmoil that it isn't worth living anymore. I'm aware that my death will bring sadness to everyone, but I guess I'm just too selfish to care.
And on his worldview, that makes sense. If you were just thrusted into existence randomly without a plan and wisdom or any wisdom at all, and you will eventually one day expire out of existence anyways, and you're not getting the dopamines and serotonins that everybody else is getting because your machinery is defunct or flawed, then why not just shut down this machine now and save yourself misery? Why not be selfish? It's not like there's something waiting on the other side. It's not like your suffering will be rewarded. I mean, there's nothing. It's just dumb luck, as Alex Rosenberg said. And then he says,
I love my family. I genuinely do. And that's exactly why I decided to kill them. If I killed just myself, they would be miserable. They would spend the rest of their lives feeling guilt, despair, and a multitude of other adjectives that mean sad. I could just do them a favor and take them with me. None of us would ever have to feel sad ever again.
none of us would ever have to feel sad ever again. Meaning, once you die, you cease to exist. It's all over. You guys, this is why I'm so passionate about this class. Because this is the alternative that's being peddled out there. And people are lost. And we have to be the lighthouses in darkness. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us hidayah and guidance. Remember how we started this argument? And do not be like those who forget Allah, so Allah causes them to forget their own souls. When you forget Allah, you forget what makes you uniquely human. From free will to consciousness to spirituality. And then you're forced to reduce human beings to random evolutionary luck. Just like another animal, just like another organism, another advanced primate, sharing ancestors with chimpanzees, to another biochemical machine. وَنَسَأَلُ اللَّهَ الْعَافِيَةَ. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's protection from guidance. ظُلُمَاتٌ بَعْضُهَا فَوْقَ بَعْضٍ. Layers of darkness upon darkness. وَمَنْ لَمْ يَجْعَلِ اللَّهُ لَهُ نُورٌ فَمَا لَهُ مِن نُورٍ. For those who Allah doesn't make light, there is no light. So, with this, we'll take a break, inshallah. And when we come back, we will move on to the final argument for the existence of God. And that is the Fitrah argument. And as you're going to learn, this is the argument to retire all other arguments. Folks, take a nice break. It's 12:51. Inshallah, I'll see you at 1. Assalamu alaikum. Amir, are you there yet? If you are, let me know. Because I wanted to share something quickly if you are there.
I'm here. Hello?
Amir Khan, is that you?
Yeah, that's me.
So you know how you asked a question? I was just
Can you
thinking
hear me?
about it
Yes,
during the
I'm
break.
here.
Perfect. I was just thinking about the question you asked about how is it that if the soul leaves the body, then how are we, the people whose brains are off, how are they still experiencing things when the soul depends on the brain, right? You know, the analogy that kind of came to my mind is like this. You know, when you're at work and you're tied to your computer, you're using your computer and your functionality is dependent on it. Well, then when you're done for the day and you're leaving, you know how you can take the USB home? Yeah? So it seems somewhat, and this is the best analogy I can give you, or one of the best analogies I can give you, it seems like when the soul and the body part ways, then like it happens at night, it seems like some data is kept with the soul, which is where some level of awareness is maintained. Second thing, we know from a purely Islamic point of view that the souls, when they leave the body, they are able to interact with other souls, which is why you see deceased relatives. And we have hundreds of stories in this regard of people or scholars who passed away, but then they were seen by their students. How did Allah deal with them? And they had conversation. So when you enter the realm of the souls, interactions can occur, and that's where another level of perception and experience kind of kicks in. So cookies is a great example too. Like this is a internet term, but yeah. Okay. All right. With this in mind, inshallah, we are ready to start. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. اللهم زدنا علما وعملا يا رب العالمين. You guys, we are ready to start the Fitrah argument. Let us begin by looking at, I always introduce the argument by some reference to from Quran and Sunnah. Notice what the Prophet said. So Sister Zainab, if you can translate both of them for us, inshallah, and we'll begin.
O Prophet, stand firm and true in your devotion to the religion. This is the fitrah God instilled in mankind. There is no altering God's creation.
Keep going.
Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu narrates that Allah's Messenger ﷺ said, every child is born upon fitrah. Then his parents convert him to Judaism, Christianity, or Magianism, Bukhari Muslim.
You guys, this hadith right there is critical. We're going to come back to this hadith later. Every child is born upon fitrah. And we're going to, inshallah, discuss what fitrah is in a second. But let me just kind of set the scene for y'all. Now we're beginning the final argument. And as you're going to, inshallah, learn, this is the argument to retire all other arguments. That's how powerful this one is. So let us begin. Please note down this hadith because it's going to become very important later. And we're going to, inshallah, learn just how true this hadith is in light of some of the studies that are coming out right now. every child is born upon fitrah. So, what in the world is fitrah? Of course, that is our million-dollar question. What is fitrah? You guys, I have a really easy definition for y'all that you'll inshallah like and appreciate. Let me give you an analogy and then kind of build upon that analogy. From an Islamic point of view, you know how every phone comes with default factory settings with an operating system and like basic features and apps already installed? Well, really, fitrah is pretty much that. It's the default factory settings God creates you upon, and they're embedded in the human psyche. Yeah. It's the original configuration God instilled into you, which is why you have a moral instinct, which is why you have a logical instinct, a beauty instinct. These are, again, features, apps installed into you. Now, you may not be aware of this fitrah, but it's always operating in the background like an operating system. And together, you and I, inshallah, right now, we're going to do a little experiment and we're going to try to discover fitrah. You guys get ready. Inshallah, this is it's a powerful little experiment for you. To the best of my ability, I wanted to help you see and detect fitrah, which is not an easy thing to do, especially on a Zoom class. But let's do this. Let's do a little experiment and see if it turns off certain light bulb moments for y'all. So, I'm about to show you a picture. I want you guys to write onto the chat box your first reaction. Your very first reaction that comes to your mind the moment you look at this picture. If you guys are ready, 3, 2, 1. What's your first reaction when you see this? Cute. Cute. Very good. Only 2 people had a reaction. Allahul Musta'an. Happy. Mashallah, mashallah. I think I could summarize everybody's reaction in one word, and that is, it's really beautiful. It's aesthetically appealing, if you will, and it's just a delightful experience to look at this. Yeah. So, the question I want to ask you: what about this picture that makes it so beautiful? What is it about this picture? In fact, I could ask a more fundamental question. If I asked you to define beauty, what would you say? What is the standard and criteria of beauty? For like most human beings, it's a very difficult thing to define. Most you can do is talk about how you feel when you see something beautiful and delightful and cute. But what are the subcomponents and criteria of beauty? It's very, very difficult to express. Very difficult to capture. By the way, we have the same problem with courage. How do you define courage? What is the criteria and component of like when someone's acting courageously? What is the definition? I would say the same issue with when something is moral and immoral. What's the criteria? Like, we recognize when something is good or evil or delightful or outrageous. But what is the criteria? You know, what is that equation? That if those boxes are checked, oh, that's moral, that's immoral. Oh, by the way, this is the same issue when, for instance, when you know that moment when something makes sense, something clicks. Most of us have never studied the rules of logic. Yet we are very confidently expressing, oh, Brother Amir, that makes sense. That doesn't make sense. Folks, this right here is the point. Philosophers have been working over time trying to define these terms, trying to capture these terms, try to come up with standards. You know the best answer that they've come up with? Here we go. Take a look at it. They say, I know it when I see it. I know it when I see it. And this right here is the punchline. How is it that you can't define beauty? You don't know the criteria of beauty. No one sat down and spoon-fed you the principles of beauty, but you instantly recognize it when you see it. You don't know the rules of logic. You've never systematically studied them, but you know intuitively when something makes sense. This right here is what you call fitrah. So let's dive. Hopefully this helps you see what we mean by fitrah. That you have this intuitive knowledge, patterns, and you have this framework built inside of you that allows you to quickly recognize beauty, morality, logic. It's incredible how it works. So let us go into this now. What is fitrah? You guys, I'm going to give you 5 aspects of fitrah, just very briefly. Go ahead and kind of just get them down into your notes. Normally, I would ask you and engage you, but for the sake of time, let me go a little faster on this particular slide. You'll notice if you go to page number, I believe, 44, there are 5 blanks for you. These are the 5 aspects of fitrah you want to get down. Now, Sister Zainab, you made an interesting point. Pleasing to the eye, subjective. But we know they're universal symbols of beauty. Scenic beauty, mountains, they're universally appreciated. The question, once again, is how is it that human beings have this beauty impulse? Where immediately, without studying a theory of beauty, they know what is beautiful. How does that recognition occur? What is this inside of you that screams out, oh, that's beautiful? So, we, as Muslims, we have the concept of fitrah. What is fitrah? Fitrah, once again, is a default factory setting that God created you upon. It's instilled into your psyche. It has 5 aspects. Number 1, common sense and a moral compass. Go ahead and write that down as the first aspect. And you guys, this aspect of fitrah, like every other aspect of fitrah we're going to see, it gives you some basic built-in knowledge. That is self-evident knowledge that you never question. It's just built right into you. It's installed right into you. It's there whether you realize it or not, and you use it subconsciously or consciously. Let me show you, for instance, the basic built-in knowledge this aspect of fitrah gives you. Something can't be true and false at the same time. There's no argument to be made here to prove this statement. It's base fundamental knowledge. Similarly, taking a life without a cause is wrong. It's basic fitri knowledge that comes with the package. No one needs to make an argument to convince you taking a life without a cause is wrong. Once again, basic facts of fitrah, built-in knowledge that you come with as part of your factory settings. Or you know how Thomas Jefferson writes in the Declaration of Independence, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men, I don't know if he says this before or after, but all men are created equal, endowed with their creator with certain inalienable rights, and X, Y, and Z. So, this first aspect of fitrah is common sense and a moral compass. And it gives you basic knowledge in that regard, that something can be true and false at the same time. Basics of morality. And that leads me to the second aspect of fitrah. Trust in your mind and sensory experience. Normally, I would ask you, this aspect of fitrah, this particular app in your fitrah, what basic fitri knowledge does that give you? Normally, I would ask you, somebody wants to take a crack at it, great. Every aspect of fitrah gives you basic facts that you work with, that you take it for granted as truth, and then you work from there. So for instance, this one gives you the knowledge my mind is reliable. That's not something that is ever have to be proven to you. You take it as a default. You take it as a starting point. It never has to be questioned. Never has to be substantiated. My mind is reliable. Or for instance, the external world is real and not just an illusion in my head. Basic fitri knowledge. Now someone could come and argue, they're like, what if we're living in a matrix? What if it's just an illusion? That is not something, first of all, you could ever provide an argument for. I mean, what argument can you make to say that we're not living in some dream reality? It's just presupposed as true. It's the default. It's just built and hardwired into you. Basic fitri knowledge. Another aspect of your fitrah is logical and mathematical intuition, which is why you know mathematical relations are valid. Like A plus B equals B plus A. The fact that a part can never be greater than a whole. Conclusions logically follow from true premises. Remember I showed you A equals B, B equals C, therefore A equals C. That logical connection and flow, it does not have to be questioned, because the flow is built into that logical engine inside of you. It just naturally occurs. Number 4, appreciation of beauty and truth. The fact that truth is desired over falsehood, that basic fact is built into our psyche. We're oriented that way. We often find poetry, music, scenic views beautiful. And the last aspect of fitrah that at least, this is not an exhaustive list, but I'm giving you the key ones. Recognition and longing for a higher power and purpose. You guys, without exception, as we're going to learn in a bit, every culture has some belief in a higher power. From the beginning of human civilization that we have records of, every culture has some conception of a higher power. We all have, as psychologists tell us, desire to be part of something bigger than ourselves. If you guys watch Simon Sinek, I'm like a big fan. He wrote a famous book called Starting with the Why. You know, business leadership is all over this right now. They're like, best organizations are why-based, purpose-based. Where when your mission, when you have a cause, when you have a why clarified, people latch on to that why because people want to be part of something bigger than ourselves. And that has a huge impact on their motivation and their longevity and low turnover rates and so on and so forth. There are people who take pay cuts because the organization connects with their why. So these are some aspects of fitrah and the basic fitri knowledge it gives you. So I'm going to give a few minutes, a few seconds, and you guys just go ahead and get this down, inshallah. If you understood this, inshallah, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of this basic fitri knowledge I just shared with you, and I'm going to park it all on the side right here for you. Hopefully I didn't go too fast. If you want me to go back to the previous slide, I can. Let me know, no problem. But for now, what I've done, I've taken all the basic fitri knowledge that is hardwired into you, and I've kind of parked it on the side so you can look at it all at once, and now it's time to construct the argument. Let's analyze this together. You guys all fitri knowledge. So, Sister Zainab, if you are ready, if you can go on to the next page for us, and Bismillah, go ahead and read from the top. Go ahead.
So critical, all of the fitri knowledge captured above has 3 characteristics.
Now go ahead, read the first one for us.
It's foundational upon which all other arguments and beliefs rest.
Yes. You guys, these particular ones, so let me just focus on that and help you understand what do I mean by this. Because these basic fitri facts that I just shared with you, this fundamental knowledge that is kind of hardwired into you is the building blocks, the base material to construct any other argument. Like, let me do another experiment with you all. Imagine you are arguing with someone about this particular principle. Well, you're not arguing about this particular principle, but watch how you use this principle in a particular argument. Imagine you're having an argument about US drone strikes overseas. So you're talking to someone and you're like, US launching drone strikes overseas is absolutely wrong. And the person you're talking to, let's call him Bush with a different spelling. That person's like, why is that a problem? Prove to me it's wrong. So you respond to them by saying, but innocent civilians die every time United States launches drone strikes. And that person comes back to you and says, why is that a problem? We have to get the terrorists. So you're getting a little frustrated. You're like, but taking an innocent human life is wrong. Notice, when the argument is stripped of all the fancy paddings, it comes down to that basic fitri building block. And here you go. That is the basic fitri knowledge right there. Now imagine Bush turns around and says, why is that a problem? Well, at that moment, you can't really have a conversation with this person because he wants you to prove something that's supposed to be self-evident. I want to ask a little bit of a difficult question. If someone's interested, take a crack at it. You guys, this came up in your TA reviews, so it's not entirely unfair for me to ask this, but let me pose a question to you. And the question is, if you didn't have basic self-evident truths, the building blocks that I'm talking about that I've shown you earlier, you could never make any argument. Did you know that? Someone kind of elaborate if you can. Like, what the heck am I saying at this point? If you didn't have these basic building blocks through which we construct all other arguments on top, you could never make any argument. Rafi, what do you got for us?
I think it's kind of like a unwritten rule in like debate where you have to have some like ground Like you both have to be on the some level of like debating ground where you can agree on certain things.
Yes.
So if you start to object every single point one person makes, then there's nothing you can base any argument on.
There's a fancy word I'm looking for. What would it lead to? So Rafi, let me construct it for you. If let's say I made an argument, you're like, prove that to me, yeah. And then, so moment you give a proof, mashallah, people are catching on to this. They're like, prove that to me. So once you give the proof, you're like, well, prove that to me. If this went on forever, what do you have? You have an infinite regress, and you can never make any argument. Thank you, Sister Zainab and Sister Aina. Will give you half a point each. It leads to an infinite regress because every proof needs a proof, which needs a proof, and needs a proof. It keeps going back forever, and you never are able to make any claim. It's so frustrating. But alhamdulillah, that we have self-evident, basic fitri knowledge that can be taken as truth without requiring any external arguments. And that becomes your starting point. And some of those facts that I shared with you are those basic building blocks that you need if you're going to make any claim. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. So same thing, like imagine someone asks you, okay, let me ask you guys this. If someone asks you, how do you know your past is real? Tell me, you guys, what fitri knowledge from the list on the left, which ones would you be forced to use to make your point? 5, 4. If you had to prove to someone, my mind is reliable. Very good, Rafi. That's one. Mason, go ahead.
He got mine as well. He got the snag.
Got it. The world is not an illusion. Very good. There are a bunch of different points that you can use. I have those two particular. My mind is reliable. The external world is real. That just has to be taken as truth. Any prompt on their part to like, no, prove that to me, at that point you have hit a wall. Basically, you know how they say, you have hit a philosophical bedrock with a shovel of a stupid question. I don't know if you ever heard of that phrase. That's basically the point that you hit. Wait, what if someone asks you, why is whole greater than the part? Like, what fitri knowledge would you use, folks? Let me just see if I can quickly test y'all on this. If someone's like, prove to me that the whole will always be greater than the part. I mean, I guess you can show a picture, but what if they don't want to recognize? Yeah, you just go off of mathematical relationships. That mathematical relationships are valid, simple, and you move on. That you have to presuppose that, inshallah, to make any meaningful claim. And that leads me to the second aspect. Go ahead, Sister Zainab.
It's self-evident, requiring no external justification. Denial leads to absurdities.
And that is something I've already hinted at in the previous one. So you guys, let's do this little exercise. Try denying for me, my mind is reliable. What does that lead to? Drop a hashtag real quick, folks. If someone tried to deny my mind is not reliable, what would that lead to? 5, 4, 3. What would that lead to? Like, you can't, these self-evident things, you can't even deny them without resorting to them. This is the irony of this. Anyone who says my mind is reliable and they try to deny that, you would have to presuppose reliability of the mind to deny it in the first place. Like, you can't even deny without assuming your mind is reliable enough to deny. So you run into this loop. Oh, try this one. So the answer is the very denial assumes the reliability of your mind. What about this? The external world is real and not an illusion in your head. If you deny that, folks, what absurdities does that lead to? Obviously, for the fact that everything becomes just this haze. But once again, it leads to some really unintelligent claims, such as when you say everything is an illusion, you're still affirming a type of reality. It's just that on your version of reality, nothing is legit, nothing is real. On my version of reality, everything is legit and real. What privileges your reality with greater legitimacy than mine? You're still affirming a type of reality you can't escape. Again, these are fundamental, basic facts built into you. They're so self-evident that even denying them requires affirming them. It's amazing. Here's the last one. Truth is desirable over falsehood. If someone would try to deny that denial itself would be meant as a truthful statement. So once again, it's like, I don't know if you guys, hopefully this is not too abstract for y'all. I just want you to appreciate that's how robust these principles are, that denying them would require affirming them. is very difficult to escape. It's self-evident, requiring no external justification. Their denials renders reality unintelligible. It leads to absurdities. And finally, of course, Sister Zainab, Bismillah, go ahead.
It's intuitively held across cultures and civilizations.
So, for instance, take mathematical relationships are valid, for instance. Go ahead, Sister Zainab, read this for us.
We can trace the beginning of mathematics as early as 20,000 BC, with a tally on a bone representing earliest known sequencing of prime numbers.
Or take another one, for instance, taking a life without a cause is wrong, or any moral principle. Recent study was done by anthropologists at the University of Oxford, and they have discovered that they believe to be 7 universal moral rules in a survey of like 60 cultures from around the world. And here are some of these rules. Help your family, help your group, return favors, be brave, defer to superiors, divide resources fairly, and respect others' property. Again, this it's intuitively held across cultures and civilizations, whether they're cross-communicating or not. Again, I'm giving you glimpses of how Fitri knowledge manifests itself. So, folks, if you understood these 3 aspects, like these are the 3 characteristics, how you recognize something is basic, axiomatic Fitri knowledge. If you got that, we just have to now bring it together and ask the $1 million question. And that is, does belief in the Almighty God qualify as basic Fitri knowledge? Can we make that claim? Well, the answer depends. It depends. Is it foundational? Is it self-evident? And is it intuitively held across cultures? So that's basically now the argument right here. Does belief in Allah qualify as a basic, fundamental, foundational knowledge? Does it? Well, we would have to make sure it meets all of these 3 criteria. So we're gonna inshallah start wrapping up the class now. We're bringing this together, you all. So let me pose a question. Sister Zainab, go ahead.
Is belief in God foundationally and so evident and so self-evident that reality would be unintelligible or meaningless without it?
That it would lead to crazy absurdities. I want to make the argument that the answer is yes. Why? Watch, it brings everything together because, first of all, every human civilization, despite distance and diversity, has believed in some deity. So it's foundational in that sense for sure. But also, without God, morality becomes absurd and arbitrary. We can't affirm the credibility of our minds. We can't affirm free will. We have to treat consciousness as an illusion. We have to treat beauty and complexity of nature as a random coincidence. Without God, reality loses all meaning and purpose because nothing is intentionally designed. Existence becomes a pointless outcome of purposeless particles whizzing around each other. So for us, it definitely meets the criteria of the first 2, that it is foundational, it is self-evident, and if you don't take it as such, then the reality around you starts to unravel, to give reality some coherence, some comprehensibility. You need to affirm the belief in God. So from that point of view, we feel it does qualify for the label of foundational and self-evident. And then finally, is it intuitively held across all cultures? The answer for that is, watch the studies now that I wanted to show you guys. Is belief in God intuitive and universally held? So Sister Zainab, go ahead and inshallah start reading what's on the screen. We have like 4 or 5 slides of evidence to show, and inshallah we'll pause there.
Dr. Justin Barrett from Oxford University conducted a 3-year, £1.9 million international project involving 57 researchers conducting over 40 separate studies in 20 countries, representing a diverse range of cultures.
Yes. Basically, I wanted to share that with you so you understand the man did his homework. So what does he conclude? Go ahead, Sister Zainab.
Results: the study concluded that humans are predisposed to believe in God and an afterlife. This suggests that attempts to suppress religion are likely to be short-lived, as human thought seems to be rooted to religious concepts, such as the existence of supernatural agents or God and the possibility of an afterlife or pre-life.
You know how unreal this is? This is a cross-cultural study that shows just how intuitive, how natural it is for us to gravitate towards a higher power. It's hardwired into you. That's why atheists recently, one of the atheists or naturalists recently released a book called The God Gene, where they're like, the belief in God is so accessible, comes so naturally to people that they were forced to discover a gene. Maybe there's a gene, there's a little, wiring somewhere that if we could disable, this whole God thing will somehow disappear. That's how widespread it is. Here's another one for you. This is Justin Barrett again. He says,
This tendency to see function and purpose, plus an understanding that purpose and order comes from minded beings, makes children likely to see natural phenomena as intentionally created. Who is the creator? Children know people are not good candidates. It must have been a god. Children are born believers of what I call natural religion.
folks, what does this remind you? This particular quote right here. Hopefully, it reminds you of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. What did the Prophet ﷺ say at the beginning? كل مولود يولد على الفطرة. Fitrah, the default setting that God creates you upon. You automatically recognize. But then the fitrah can be corrupted. Unfortunately, like a compass can be malfunctioning. Another study I wanted to share with you guys. This is from Professor Alyssa and Caitlin. Go ahead, Sister Zainab. By the way, you guys don't worry about writing these quotes. I'll supply them to you, inshallah. Don't worry about it. Go ahead. Just enjoy.
The current findings suggest that there is a deeply rooted natural tendency to view nature as designed and lends empirical support to the proposal that religious non-belief is cognitively effortful.
You know what that means? Religious non-belief is cognitively effortful. She and other professors have basically stated it in more. This is a politically correct way of putting it. The non-politically correct way of putting this is that default is religious belief, and you have to be brainwashed into non-belief. It's cognitively effortful, meaning you have to exert cognitive effort to induce non-belief. It's harder to be an atheist than to be a theist. Thank you, Mason, for putting it that way. And this one is right here. This is probably the last thing I want to show you. This is so profound right here. So Professor Olivera Petrovich, she conducted experiments with British and Japanese kids. And you'll see why Japanese kids in a second. Go ahead, Sister Zainab.
So she tested hundreds of British and Japanese kids to see what causal explanations they give to both man-made and natural objects.
Continue.
She says Japanese religion, Shinto, doesn't include creation as an aspect of God's activity at all. When shown natural objects, children would predominantly go for the word God instead of either an agnostic response, nobody knows, or an incorrect response by people. She said, my Japanese research assistants kept telling me, we Japanese don't think about God as creator. It's just not part of Japanese philosophy. So it was wonderful when these children said, Kami-sama, God made it. That was probably the most significant finding. She said, I've also established that children's natural concepts of God aren't purely I can never say this word, and anthropomorphic. They certainly acquire a conception of God as man through their religious education, but no child actually links the representation of, for example, God as Jesus with the creator of the world.
SubhanAllah, man. So, I feel like just the natural tendencies inside the human being so beautifully and perfectly align with our conception of Allah. And laysa kamithlihi shay, there is nothing like unto him. We don't compare Allah with the creation. We're hawkish about that. And God as a man is something that is cognitively effortful. Someone through their religious education has to be brainwashed into it. But default, the natural concepts of God are not purely anthropomorphic, meaning they're not humanized. Amazing. Sister Sana, go ahead.
This kind of reminds me of, how some atheists or whomever say like the concept of God is just like an evolutionary adaptation.
We're coming to that. We're coming to that. But do you have a point?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that like seeing this kind of shows that it's not just about evolution, because it's not just a concept of God's existence, but that God created us in like very specific like concepts of God. It's not just like there is a higher being. We all kind of gravitate towards a similar set of beliefs.
I see what you're saying. So it's not just any Asian we're positing. It's a very consistent non-anthropomorphic version of God. So in other words, Sister Sana, if I could rephrase what you said, Our religious instinct is not just orienting us towards some random higher power, but there's an agreement even upon some of the basic attributes that this is some minded being,
Yeah.
some non-human
Because if it
being.
was just evolution, then like you could see some cultures being like, yeah, there's God, but he didn't create XYZ, you know?
Fair enough. Fair enough. Oh, there's apparently some more I have here. Um, this is a point I've already made. But some of the sociologists, anthropologists, they say, regardless of the many societal differences in how religion is structured and practiced, religion has been identified in all studied cultures. There's no known human society without religion. So, you guys understand the implications of this. This is on the next page in your notes. You guys, this is why. Understand, this is a Fitrah argument that belief in God is a philosophically basic starting point. It's self-evident. It is foundational to make sense of anything. And it is intuitively held across place and time. You guys, the implications of this argument are profound. Sister Zainab, please read some of these for us.
This is why Quran rarely dignifies atheism with a direct response.
If you listen to Sheikh Yasir Qadi, he gave a khutbah on this recently. He said Quran addresses paganism. Quran talks about nature and the design argument and other things, but to prove the attributes of Allah. But Quran rarely directly addresses atheism because it's treated as a philosophically absurd position. Because belief in God is that self-evident, basic, fitri knowledge. You guys, this is why prophets don't come with fancy philosophical arguments. This is why the iman of a villager is as valid as some professional philosopher without intellectual gymnastics, because it is default, hardwired into you, embedded into your psyche. You think, and I always say this too, I'm like, you think God would outsource his existence to be proven by some complex philosophical, deductive, inductive argument? Like, if he created you, he would leave a designer imprint, some inclination, some compass that orients you towards him. And the fact that you appreciate beauty, the fact that you appreciate right and wrong, the fact that you long for a higher power and purpose, these are exactly the things you would expect if God wanted you to discover him and connect with him and long for him, that he would give built into you these spiritual capacities and emotional capacities and love for truth and repulsion for falsehood. It's exactly what you expect. This is why I tell Muslims, because we always get trapped. The question shouldn't be, does God exist? No, that's the philosophical default. The question is, what reason do you have to reject belief in God? Because without God, reality loses all meaning. It's like if someone came to you, they said, prove to me you exist. You're like, no. The onus is on you to prove to me why I don't exist. Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. We say, I think, therefore he is. That's the philosophical default, folks. That's the starting point. The onus, the proof, the burden is on them to make the counter. So, try not to get into this defensive posture that we often get into. Understand you stand on a very profound, solid philosophical bedrock. I love this quote of Dr. Nazir. We actually put it on our Core Academy shirt. Sister Zainab, want to read it?
Faith in the divine is the bedrock for everything else to be rendered meaningful. Rather than requiring substantiation, it substantiates all else.
Rather than requiring proof, it proves all else. It gives meaning to all else. It gives coherence to all else. Now, this is, I think, what Sister Sana was kind of getting at. I think this is the objection we'll deal with, and I think this is, let me see if, yeah, I think we're basically done from there. This is the last slide, y'all. Now, Nancy the naturalist, this is the last dance, potentially. She could say, Sister Zainab, if you're ready.
So what if we have a religious instinct? Science can explain why. We evolved from this godly instinct because it has survival benefits. Our brain evolved over millions of years to have emotional capacities. From there, natural selection layered on a religious institution because it unites people, gives a sense of purpose.
Intuition, sorry. Layered on a religious intuition.
Intuition because it unites people, gives a sense of purpose, helps people cope with stress, and brings out some positive emotions.
Okay, folks, how do we respond to this? Number one, this is the classic case of genetic fallacy. So, let me explain what that means. One of the fallacies in logic is when you invalidate a position by appealing to its origin. So an example would be like this. If I make an argument that Bucks are the best team in the NBA, and I give stats and an argument, and the person invalidates me by saying, oh, you're saying that because you are from Milwaukee, so obviously you hold that view. So by appealing to the origin, he invalidated my position. Well, no, you have to make an independent argument for why Bucks are not the best team in the NBA. You have to counter it directly. You can't just appeal to the origin. Or for instance, if I said, democracy is the best system of the government, and the person turns around and says, well, you were born in America, so obviously that's the view you're going to hold. Bam. That is a genetic fallacy for you. Here what they're doing is, they're like, oh, what's the big deal? Religious instinct does not need to be taken seriously because they feel sad and lonely. They had to, that's why we have a religious instinct, because we want to render atrocities and calamities of life. We want to give some meaning into them, so that's why we have a religious instinct. So in other words, the origin of our religious instinct is because it makes us feel better. Once again, we respond back to them by saying, just because that's how the religious instinct originated, I'm not granting that for a second, but even if I did, that religious instinct developed because it helps us cope with hardship, it helps us deal with the events of life, you still have to make an independent argument and prove why there's no higher power, or why belief in the higher power is absurd. So that would still require independent arguments. And here's even a more powerful argument, inshallah, and we'll seal the deal with this one. You guys, if religious intuition with this universality should be ignored, as a naturalist would want us to do, then why not ignore your logical intuition? That also came through evolution. Causal intuition, moral intuition. Should we throw everything under the bus because it came about from evolutionary processes? But you want us to pick and choose here. You're like, oh, don't take religious intuition seriously. Yeah, it tells you there's a higher power, but ignore it. Because that came about because you felt lonely and you needed some emotional comfort. Ignore that, but keep the logical one. On your worldview, everything is coming about through blind evolutionary processes. So why should I not throw everything under the bus? So that's another argument we can make, is that if you're going to throw shade at the religious intuition, you are throwing shade on our moral intuition, logical intuition, and mathematical intuition, and so many other intuitions that are built inside of us. So it doesn't make sense to play favorites here. And there you go, folks. I know I went kind of fast at the end in an effort to get you out in time. Inshallah, we are, alhamdulillah, we are all set with the argument. There's some spiritual gems. I'll put one up for you as we're dropping off. If you want to take advantage, there are no atheists in the sinking boat. By the way, the class is officially over. Let me just make the dua, and then those of you who are trickling or sticking around, I'll just share this funny story. Subhanallah wa bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Thank you for staying late, you guys, once again. But this is an ayah in the Quran where Allah talks about how when people get in trouble, especially when they're in the middle of the ocean and the oceans are all around, even the biggest deniers of God and biggest pagans, their fitrah activates and they reach out to God and the high power that they were hardwired for. All of a sudden they call out, and then Allah saves them and they go back to their wickedness. The modern version of this is I was listening to one of the comedians. He's an atheist. I won't mention his name. He says he was riding in an airplane, and all of a sudden what happened, the airplane dipped 10,000 feet in altitude. He says, I found myself praying and I don't even believe in this stuff. Hands went up, life and death situation, fitrah activates. He's like, I'm praying, calling out to a higher power, and I don't even believe in this stuff. And he was making a joke out of it. But you see in these moments the glimpses of fitrah coming to the surface. Yeah, it's really powerful. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless us with these religious, powerful spiritual experiences like Aisha radiallahu anha had when she was reciting this verse of the Quran, and she kept reciting it over and over again, repeating this verse, crying until the entire night passed. And we know people in the religious experiences they have. Some of the most fulfilling moments of my life are the tears that I've been reduced to because thinking about Allah and His Messenger. That's the most real thing to you. That solidifies your faith. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep our fitrah intact. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless us with these experiences. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bolster our faith with guidance, with intuition, with knowledge. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. You guys, we are officially set. Let me know if you have any questions, anything else I can clarify. But other than that, alhamdulillah, we are set for the day. We are officially done with all 6 arguments for belief in God. So starting next week, we can start the next pillar, inshallah. And that should go, hopefully it'll go a lot faster. So going once, going twice, going thrice. I will send the notes out, inshallah. Subhanallah wa bihamdik. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Thank you very much. You guys take care. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.